Chapter 1967.
Qin Feiyong looked at the lady in red and frowned. Let's talk in private.
Afraid of embarrassing yourself?
You're afraid, but I'm not. We have to make it clear in front of everyone today, so that everyone knows what kind of person you are. The lady in red laughed angrily.
Qin Feiyong said in a low voice, "Don't be unreasonable, okay? How dare you say I'm unreasonable?"
The lady in red was furious. She raised the battle sword in her hand and slashed towards Qin Feiyong.
Boom. But at this moment,
the old man in white sitting in the middle of the square suddenly released a powerful aura. He stared at Qin Feiyong and the others and shouted, "This is Sky Dragon City. No violence is allowed. If you have a grudge, go outside the city and settle it."
Feeling the white-clothed old man's terrifying majesty, a trace of fear crept into the red-clothed woman's eyes. Qin Feiyong's pupils shrank.
The aura of the old man in white had already surpassed that of a war god.
Let's go outside the city." Shangguan Qiu waved his hand impatiently and opened a teleportation altar. Outside the city, in the sky above a forest, Qin Feiyong and the others appeared one after another. The lady in red also followed. Once she appeared without saying anything, she slashed towards Qin Feiyong with the battle sword in her hand.
Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. He teleported and dodged to the side.
"Why are you dodging?"
The lady in red was furious. Qin Feiyong said in a low voice, "Some things are not as simple as you think."
"Then tell me, how complicated is it?"
The lady in red roared and waved her battle sword crazily.
Qin Feiyong did not fight back, he kept dodging. Hua Yi asked suspiciously, "Fire Lotus, who is she? Why does she hate Brother Jiang so much?" "It's a long story."
Fire Lotus sighed deeply. She looked at Qin Feiyong and said, "She has lost her mind. Let her calm down first."
"Shut up. This is between us. What does it have to do with you?" The woman in red said angrily.
Fire Lotus said,
Chapter
"Some things aren't as simple as you think.
1975.
Actually,
It's not
compared to
simple.
Zhang Yunfei,
I'm
he
more
has so
concerned
many
about
women
whether the
by
big
his
shots
side.
of Jiutian
Even
Palace
the
are
manager
really
of the
watching
treasure
at this moment
pavilion
is his woman.
Qin
How
Feiyong
could he
transmitted
possibly
his
fall for
voice.
me?
Fire
The woman
Lotus
in
and
red
Qin
sneered.
Rushuang
looked at each other.
When did I become
Their
his
eyes
woman?
flickering as they
Can
looked
you
at the
stop
sky.
talking nonsense?
Jiutian Palace.
Shangguan Qiu
Inside
said
the
angrily.
palace. What
There
did
was
this
dead
have to do with
silence at
her?
this moment.
Why did she have
Everyone
to drag
looked
her
at
into
Qin
this?
Feiyong on the screen.
You do need
Their
to calm
faces
down.
full of shock.
Qin Feiyong
However,
suddenly used the
Feng Yuan
movement
and
character
Feng
art
Wanhai's
and landed
eyes were a
behind the
little hazy.
red-robed woman. Four
Slapping
perfect
the back
stage
of her
war
head
gods
with his
couldn't
palm.
even defeat a
The
beginner
woman in
stage
red
war
fainted
god.
on the spot.
One of them was
The
even
sword in
killed
his hand
instantly.
also flew out.
Everyone, if it
So
were you,
fast. Would you be
Shangguan
able to do
Qiu's
it?
pupils
A
contracted.
black-haired old man
Even she
said
had
with a
not been
hoarse
able to
voice.
catch a glimpse of
Everyone
Qin
shook
Feiyong
their
at that
heads.
moment.
I
In the
can't do it
meantime,
either.
Fire
But this
Lotus
kid
stepped
did it.
forward and
But
hugged the
how
woman
did he
in
do
red.
it?
She grabbed her
black-haired
sword
old
and
man
looked up
looked
at
at
Qin
Qin Feiyong,
Could it
asking,
be that there's a
"What
secret
Fire
hidden
Lotus
in his finger?
transmitted
I don't
her
know
voice.
either.
Someone spoke.
It's okay.
Qin Feiyong
I
shook
can't
his
keep
head.
an eye on him.
At that time,
If he
then
really
let's
dares
find
to
a place
attack
to
to
let
let
her
her
sleep
sleep
for a
for a
while.
while.
That he will become a corpse
Fire
before he can
Lotus
do
said.
anything.
Someone said.
Qin
Qin
Feiyong
Feiyong
nodded.
secretly said.
Fire
Someone
Lotus
is
moved
hearing
around
this
and
and
fixed
fixed
her
her
eyes
eyes
on
on
an
an
anxious
anxious
finger
heart
to
finally
crush the
calmed
cripple's
down.
head. She then flew
Yet
toward
his
the
soul
suddenly
was
woman in red
annihilated.
in
Brother
her
Jiang,
arms.
then
Why
why
did
don't you
cripple
tell
and
me
the
what
other
Qin
secrets are
Feiyong
hidden
hidden
in his
and landed
fingers?
beside
Because
the
we
mermaid
don't
princess.
know. Easy to believe.
Actually,
He looked
what
at
about
Hua
I noticed
Yi
that there
and
was a
said with a
murderous
smile,
aura on his
"Other one.
fingertip.
I have
Qin
something to deal with."
said,
Aura
"You go back
disappeared
to
in
the
the
Yuchin
Tower
Tower
very
first.
despicable.
I couldn't
We'll
determine
the last
its
time they
origin
entered Star
tomorrow
River
morning.
City.
Murderous
They
aura?
cheated me of a
Okay,
large
everyone
amount of
fell
value
into
gems and
gems.
left alone.
So I have always
Mysterious
wanted to kill
murderous
left.
aura.
Shangguan
These
Qiu
guys
looked
are very
very
cunning.
Feiyong and
And
said,
the
I let
method
them
to
escape
escape
every
every
time.
power.
I've realized
Just
that
now,
anything
it was
related to you is
definitely
not
not
a
a simple
thing. But
character.
unfortunately,
I didn't ask
you
you to
to
come.
escape
Anyone
again.
know
You
him?
can leave
Yeah,
now.
the black-haired
I
old
won't
man
stop
glanced
you.
at everyone,
Qin
and
Feiyong
smiled.
said
Everyone
lightly.
shook
Shook
their
their
heads.
heads.
Don't be
anxious.
Shangguan
Great
Qiu
elder.
stared at Qin
Feng
Feiyong
Yuan
angrily.
suddenly stood up.
Qin
Sooner
Feiyong
or
ignored
later,
him.
looked at
You will
Feng
meet
Yuan.
grab the mermaid
Feng
princess
Yuan
hand and said with a
"Yeah,
smile.
everyone,
Great
don't
elder,
get me
I know
wrong.
this kid.
Fire
She came
Lotus
to me
suddenly
because
she
she
has
has
business to
stopping in her
discuss.
tracks. Relative of
But it
yours.
seems that we
Trace
can't
the
talk about
black-haired
it
old
now.
man was suspicious.
Who said
What
we
can't
can't
talk
relative?
about it? Qin Feiyong
Shangguan
and the
Qiu
others
said
face hurriedly.
suspiciously.
Tell me,
He
how
shook
many
his head
divine
and said,
gems do you
Fire
need to
Lotus
sell
shook
the
her
formula
head
of
and
continued
continued
yellow
walking.
dragon elixir?
Qin
I
Feiyong
only
and the
know
others
his
were
name.
baffled.
As
Qin
for his
Feiyong
was
was
stunned
for a
and
moment.
said,
I sent
smile.
people to
Then asked through
investigate
voice
but found
stewardess,
nothing.
Qin Dage.
How can the
Is there
formula
one
of
more
the
person
elixir
who
be
hasn't
bought
shown
of
up?
divine
Everyone looked at
gems?
each other.
Besides,
What's his name?
I don't plan to
Suspicious.
sell it
Asked
to
the
you.
black-haired
Didn't
old
Gao
man.
Xiaolong
Shangguan
remind
Qiu
us
frowned,
Jiang
especially
said,
careful of
According
According
to my investigation,
why did you
she
do
entered
the
Heavenly
elixir?
Dragon
Jiang
City a
few
few days
ago,
ago.
and Chao
I
Zhiyun
gave
last
you the
night
elixir
elixir
to
to
let
let
you know the value
then how
of
do
the
you know
elixir.
him? Met.
I
What
believe
about
you
Zhang
tried
Yunfei?
doubtfully. Otherwise,
This kid is an
Fire Lotus
extreme
thought to
contrarian
in person.
So
A
it
few
was
days
him.
ago,
I
I
humiliated
tried
my grandson
It's
and show
exactly as
everyone
you
in the
said.
treasure
Later.
pavilion.
Shang
Causing me
Wan
hiding
nodding
somewhere,
somewhere,
Qin
watching us
Fei-young
right
said.
now.
However, in that
Qin
case,
Fei-young
as a
said
shrewd
through voice
businessman, after all,
transmission.
you should know that
My
it's impossible
grandson
for me to sell you the
skills
scan in the
formula.
surrounding
But
forest.
then
What's
tell
even
me,
more
what's
excessive
your
is that
plan?
you actually slandered our
Shang
Nine
Wan
Heavens
asked.
Palace in the dark.
Her face was full of
They say
disappointment.
that our Nine Heavens
In
Palace is a
fact,
bully. She had expected
scourge
that
of
it
the
would be
northern
impossible
region.
to get the formula.
Therefore,
I would
however,
like to
the
implore
formula
Grand
of this
Elder to
elixir was
severely
too
punish
tempting.
this child as a warning to
Therefore,
others.
she had a glimmer of hope.
Feng Yuan bowed.
Now that her hope was dashed, she could only settle for
Did
the
he
next
really
best thing.
slander you like that?
My plan.
Everyone was
Qin
seething
Fei-young
with
pondered
anger.
for a while and said
Absolutely.
with a smile.
Actually,
Feng Yuan
I'm
nodded.
very easy to satisfy.
Great elder.
Let's
This
work
matter
together.
is
Indeed very serious.
Work together?
That's right.
Shangguan Qiu
We should
frowned.
immediately disqualify him from the
We'll work
examination
together and
cut
share
off
the
his head in
benefits
front of
equally.
everyone as an example to
Qin
others.
Fei-young said.
The group was
If that's the
furious
case,
as they looked at
it'll
the
involve a
black-haired
lot of
old
problems.
man. The black-haired
How are we
old
going to
man
split
looked
the
at the image of
benefits?
Qin Fei-young.
Who will provide
his
the
eyes
herbs?
flickering.
Also,
Feng
if
Yuan
you don't
Hai
want
glanced at the
divine
black-haired
gems,
old man and
what do you
transmitted
want?
his voice.
Wait.
Lord Father,
Shangguan Qiu
how come
said.
I didn't know that Zhang
Qin
Haotian
Fei-young
had slandered
said,
our Nine
I
Heavens
don't care
Palace?
about divine gems.
Idiot.
I want
This
soul
is obviously
stones.
something I made up.
Soul stones.
Feng Yuan said.
Shangguan Qiu raised
Made
his
up.
eyebrows immediately.
Feng Yuan Hai was shocked
I know
and
that the
transmitted
treasure
his
school
voice.
doesn't use soul
Lord
stones
Father,
for
you're lying to
transactions.
everyone.
However, if
These
you want to
people are
work with
either in
me,
seclusion
you have
or
to
in
use soul
seclusion.
stones.
They don't know
There's no
anything
room
about
for
the outside
negotiation.
world. Even
Qin
if I
Fei-young
lied to them,
said,
they wouldn't know.
You're going too far.
Feng Yuan sneered.
Shangguan
Although
Qiu
that's
was
the
very
case,
dissatisfied.
these people aren't stupid.
Then forget
Especially
it.
Grand
Qin
Elder.
Fei-young said
He's
with
smart
a faint
and
smile.
cautious.
He'll
Shangguan
definitely
Qiu was
send
quite
people
angry.
to investigate.
Young Master Zhang,
When he finds out
you
that
have
there's
to
no
think
such
carefully,
thing,
Lord
if
Father.
you leave the treasure
How
school,
are you going to explain
even
it
if you
to
have
him?
the formula,
Feng
it's
Yuan
not
Hai
worth
said.
much.
Is that so?
I need you to
Qin
make
Fei-young
arrangements for
laughed.
this matter. Don't you
Feng
know?
Yuan
The
transmitted
treasure
his
school
voice.
has branches in
How?
all the big and small
Feng Yuan
towns in
Hai
the
was
entire
suspicious.
northern region.
Let someone pretend
In
to be
other words,
Zhang
the
Haotian's
resources
accomplice
of the
and go
northern
to the
region
major
are
restaurants
basically
to
under
spread
the
these
control of the
rumors.
treasure school.
This way,
As long
Zhang
as the treasure
Haotian
school
won't
says
be
the
able to
word,
defend himself.
no one will sell you the herbs.
Feng Yuan
Without the
secretly
herbs.
sneered.
What's the
Hearing
value
this,
of your
Feng
Juku
Yuan
yellow
Hai
dragon
secretly
elixir?
gave a thumbs up and said,
Shangguan
Lord
Qiu
Father
joked.
is wise.
From the beginning, she realized that she was in a passive position,
Feng Yuan
so she
is
wanted to
courting
take
death.
advantage of this
Feng
to take
Yuan
the initiative.
secretly laughed.
I won't
Feng
doubt the
Yuan
ability
Hai's
of the
eyes
treasure
also had a
school.
trace of a smile.
However,
Then
the treasure
found an
school
excuse
is not
and
the
left
only
the hall.
one in the northern region.
We can't wrong a good
There's
person,
also the
but
Ninth
we can't
Heaven
let
Palace.
a bad person go. I
This
believe that
matter
the Ninth
still
Heaven
needs to be
Palace won't listen
investigated.
to the orders of the treasure school.
After the investigation,
Qin Fei-young
we'll
said
make
with
a decision.
This
Not
bastard.
long after Feng Yuan Hai
Shangguan
left,
Qiu cursed
the
in her
black-haired
heart.
old man who
Why
had been
was he so
silent
difficult
finally
to deal
spoke.
with?
Feng
Indeed.
Yuan's eyes flashed
Although
and
the
returned to
treasure
the school
seat
was powerful,
not saying
it
anything
could not
again.
interfere in the
At the
affairs
same
of the
time,
Ninth Heaven Palace.
in a small valley.
Think about it carefully.
One-eyed dragon Li
We'll
Gui
talk when you've
and
made
the
up
little
your
girl all
mind.
sat on the ground.
Qin Fei-young
Cold sweat
smiled
all over
faintly.
their bodies.
He
Their
turned and
faces
led
full
the
of
mermaid
fear.
princess and
I
Qin
really
Rushuang
didn't
to the
expect
peak of the
this
mountain
Zhang
where the
Haotian to be
fire
so
lotus was
powerful.
located.
Wait.
Suddenly,
A
seeing
low
this,
voice sounded above the
Shangguan
valley.
Qiu was very
The
anxious.
three of them were stunned and looked
However,
up,
only
she
to see a
swallowed the
purple
words that
clothed
were
youth
about to come
standing
out
in
of
the
her
void
mouth.
above.
She
Holding a
lowered her
folding
head,
fan in his hand,
feeling
looking
extremely
quite
irritated.
irritated.
Whoosh.
Zhang Yunfei?
Just as Qin
Why are you
Fei-young and the
here?
others left,
The little girl
a young
raised
man in
her
purple
eyebrows.
suddenly appeared in front of
Zhang
Shangguan
Yunfei
Qiu.
landed in front of the three of them and said,
Shangguan
I
Qiu
followed
was
you all the
stunned.
way here.
She looked up at
What
the young
about
man
Big
in
Brother
purple
Nye?
and frowned.
Li Gui
Who are
asked.
you? The
Zhang
young man
Yunfei
in
said,
purple smiled.
He's with Zhang Haotian.
Who I am is not important.
What?
What's
Isn't
important
he
is the
courting
elixir
death?
formula of
The little
Juku
girl and the
Yellow
other
Dragon's
two's
faces
faces
changed.
How do you know about
Don't
the Juku
worry.
Yellow Dragon
Big
elixir?
Brother Nye isn't that easy to
Are
deal
you
with.
following us?
Shangguan Qiu's eyes flashed coldly.
Zhang Yunfei
I
opened
am
his folding
indeed
fan
following
and
you.
slowly fanned it,
However,
smiling.
I didn't hear about the Juku
That's
Yellow
true.
Dragon elixir
The
from
three
you.
of them nodded.
The young man
The
in
little
purple
girl let out
said,
a long sigh
What
and
do you
said,
mean? I thought
Shangguan
this mission would be
Qiu
very
frowned.
simple.
The
But I
young
didn't
man in
expect
purple
it to be
said,
so difficult.
I mean, I also have the
Li
elixir
Gui said
formula of the
sinisterly,
Juku Yellow
"It's
Dragon
all."
elixir.
Sure.
Zhang Yunfei's expression
Chapter
changed,
1968.
and hurriedly made a gesture to Li
What?
Gui to keep
Shang
quiet.
Guanqiu was shocked.
Li
I'm not
Gui
lying
frowned.
to you.
Have you
The young
forgotten
man in
what
purple
Guyong
took
said?
out an elixir from
During
his
the
chest.
test, the big
Shang
shots of
Guanqiu
9
took a
Heaven
look.
Palace will be
It was
secretly
the
watching us?
9 Chu yellow
If
dragon
you say
elixir.
it now, won't
She
it be
looked
the
at the
same
young
as
man in
exposing
purple
that
and
we were
asked,
ordered by
"Do
Feng
you know
Yuan and
Zhang
Feng Wen
Haotian?"
Hai? That's none of
Zhang
your
Yunfei
business,
said.
The young
Hearing
man in
this,
purple
Li Gui
smiled.
looked at the sky in
Shang
horror and
Guanqiu's
said,
eyes
"I
twinkled.
really forgot about
She
this,
asked,
but I'm not
you
wrong.
showed up to cooperate
It's all
with
Guyong, Feng
Yes.
Yuan,
The
and
young
Feng
man in
Wenhai's
purple
fault.
nodded.
What's your
Indeed.
condition?
They should have
Shang
told us
Guanqiu
Zhang Haotian's
asked.
true strength.
Zhang Haotian asked for soul
Otherwise,
stones.
we wouldn't
But
have
I
been
only
so
asked
careless.
for divine gems.
Even a cripple
The
won't
young man
die.
in purple smiled.
The one-eyed
Is
man
there such a
thought,
good deal? The most important thing
Guanqiu
is that
looked
the
at the
soul
young man
stones
in
they
purple
gave were far less than Zhang Haotian's
Yes, there
value.
is such a good deal.
With Zhang Haotian's strength,
all the
he
herbs
should
will
have
be
given us
provided
at
by
least
the treasure school,
100,000 soul
and I'm
stones
only
each.
responsible for refining
But they
them.
only gave us
We'll split the
50,000.
auction price 50-50.
The little girl said angrily.
The young man in
Maybe
purple
Feng
said,
Yuan and the others don't know Zhang Haotian's
Guanqiu
true
hesitated.
strength.
However,
Although the treasure
since we've
school would
already
provide the
accepted
herbs
this
50-50, we have
compared
to
to
continue.
Qin Feiyang's condition,
Otherwise,
it was like a
not
pie
to mention
falling from
Zhang
the sky.
Haotian.
Actually,
Even Feng Yuan
you don't
won't let
have
us
to
go.
think too much.
You all know the
I don't
force
have
is in
any
Feng
other
Yuan's
purpose.
hands.
I
If we're
just wanted to
targeted by
press
him,
Zhang
even Nye
Haotian.
Yun, the
The
son
young
of the
man
Star
in
River
purple
City Lord,
laughed.
won't be able to
Suppress
escape.
Zhang Haotian. Zhang
Shang
Yunfei
Guanqiu
said
murmured.
secretly.
The young man
We
in
know
purple
this.
smiled. But this Zhang
Steward,
Haotian's methods are
this is
so
a once-in-a-lifetime
lifetime
opportunity.
How should we deal with him? Shang Guanqiu
Li
thought for a
Gui
while
asked
and
secretly.
nodded.
Okay,
Don't worry.
let's cooperate.
Big brother Nye
Let
has his
Zhang
own way.
Haotian go to hell.
Let's just follow
The
them
young
and
man
see
in
what
purple
happens.
laughed and stretched
Zhang
out his hand.
Yunfei smiled
You're
secretly.
indeed a smart man.
We can only
I
rely
wish us
on
a
Big
happy
brother Nye now.
cooperation.
Let's
Happy
go. If we delay
cooperation.
any longer,
Shang
we won't be
Guanqiu
able to
also
catch up with
stretched out
them.
her hand and shook
The
hands
little
with the
girl
young man in
sighed
purple.
secretly. The purple-clothed young man smiled. He lifted
this
his head
time,
and looked at
the
the
Sky
mountain
Dragon
peak where
mountain
Qin
range was
Feiyang
filled
and
with
the others
killing
were.
intent.
The corners of
Battles
his
could be
mouth
seen
curled
everywhere.
up slightly.
Qin
He
Feiyang
looked
and
at
the others were
Guanqiu and
unimpeded.
said, I have
Because of
something to do
Nye
now.
Yun.
We will
After all,
discuss the
they were
details
still at the
tomorrow.
edge,
And it was difficult to
Then I'll
encounter
wait
a
for
Lord
you
God
at the treasure
level
school.
beast.
Shang
Therefore, with
Guanqiu
Nye
said,
Yun's strength, he could
"See
kill
you."
any beast
After
in an
the
instant.
purple-clothed youth
In
finished
Nye Yun's
speaking,
opinion,
he
the
disappeared
more
without
effort
a
he
trace.
put in, the more
At the mountain
Qin
peak
Feiyang
in the
and the
distance,
others would trust him.
Qin Feiyang
Only then
did not
could he
find
find
he
a
was
chance to kill with
intercepted.
one strike. He bent down
the
and took off
surface,
the woman's
Qin
mask.
Feiyang treated him
Looking at the
wholeheartedly,
familiar face,
but he never
his
let him get
expression
close
was
to
Fire
complicated.
Lotus and Qin Rushuang asked,
Qin Rushuang
is she
glanced at Nye
Xueqi
Yun
and said secretly,
Yes.
Feiyang, when you
Feiyang
killed the
nodded.
cripple, did you
Although
use the kill symbol
Xueqi
wore a mask and intended
Yes.
to conceal
Qin
her identity?
Feiyang replied.
The sword revealed
As
her
expected.
identity. Because
Like I
this
said,
battle sword was
how
the
could you
Fire
possibly
Dragon
be able
Divine
to shatter
Sword,
his head with
the
merely
mermaid
the power of
princess
a finger?
asked. Then
Qin
what do you plan
Rushuang
to do with her?
smiled.
A cold glint flashed in Qin Rushuang's
I
eyes.
couldn't do anything.
Is there
It's
even a need
impossible
to kill a
ask?
perfect realm
Kill
god
him.
of war with
It's
other
too
divine
cruel
arts
to kill her.
However,
After all,
I did it secretly.
she was also kept in
Even
the dark
if the big
about the
shots of the
engagement.
Ninth Heaven Palace
The
were
mermaid
watching,
princess
they
said,
probably wouldn't
"Girl,
have noticed. You're still speaking
Qin
up for
Feiyang
her?
transmitted
Do you
his
have
voice.
a fever? If
Qin
they were really
Rushuang
watching
touched
us,
the mermaid
even if they
princess's
didn't
forehead
notice
and
the kill
frowned.
symbol art, it would have attracted
I'm
their
not
attention.
speaking up for her.
After all,
She's
a
just
beginner
too
realm
pitiful.
god of war killing
Look
a
at her
perfect
now.
realm god of war
She
in an
still
instant
thinks
is
that
an
the marriage
unbelievable
contract
thing.
is real.
From
The
now
mermaid
on,
princess
we have
said,
to be more cautious.
"You're overflowing with
Qin
sympathy."
Rushuang reminded. Qin Rushuang shook her
I
head
know.
and said,
All
If we
right.
really let her go,
Before Cripple
not
and
only
the
will she
others
continue
ambushed
to pester us,
You said
but she will
something.
also pose a
You
great
said
threat
you were
to
very
us.
concerned about
What
something.
threat?
What is
The
it?
mermaid princess
Qin
was
Feiyang
suspicious.
asked secretly.
She knows our
Qin
true
Rushuang
identity.
became silent.
Wouldn't it be troublesome
Seeing
if she
this,
leaks it out?
Qin Feiyang was even
Also,
more confused.
you should know that the Gua
Sigh.
family's destruction
Qin
is also
Rushuang
related
sighed
to us.
secretly
And transmitted her
Qin
voice.
Rushuang said,
I'm concerned about the
Seems
power
like
of the
it.
bloodline. The mermaid princess
power
nodded
of the
in
bloodline?
realization.
Qin
If
Feiyang was
Xueqi knew
stunned.
about this,
That's
she
right.
would definitely think of
You,
ways
a
to take
descendant
revenge
of
on
several
them.
generations,
That's why we
have
must
already
not let
undergone
this woman
atavism.
live.
A
However,
shocking murderous
his
intent
biological
appeared in
daughter,
Qin
have not
Rushuang's
shown any
eyes.
signs of
She
atavism.
raised her index finger
I
and
can't
pointed
help
in
but
the air.
wonder if I'm really
A
his
streak of
flesh and
divine
blood.
power immediately
Qin
appeared
Rushuang
and
said
swept
helplessly.
towards Xueqi's forehead.
So it's about
However,
this.
at this
Qin
moment,
Feiyang suddenly
Xueqi,
understood
who
and
was
secretly
lying on the
said
ground,
proudly, and the Fire
This kind of
Dragon
thing
Divine
depends on
Sword
talent and
disappeared from their
opportunity.
sight.
It can't be forced.
Qin Rushuang was
Don't
stunned.
be so smug.
She immediately
Qin
released her
Rushuang
divine
glared at
sense
Qin
and
Feiyang
covered the
angrily.
surroundings.
Qin
However,
Feiyang smiled.
she did not find
Actually,
any trace
this
of the
kind of
spatial
thing really
divine
can't be
item in the
forced.
void. For example,
What's going on?
his great-grandfather
Everyone
Emperor
looked at the
Hong,
void of
as
space
the
in shock.
biological son of the
Qin
ancestor.
Feiyang looked
Didn't
around
his
and his
bloodline
eyes
power
flickered.
also not undergo
I
atavism?
think that spatial divine items
It's
should be
better to let
embedded with the
nature
soul
take its
concealing
course.
stone.
Otherwise,
Damn it.
It will
Who
only
could it
add to
be?
his troubles if he
Qin
continues
Rushuang's
to be
face
entangled.
was as cold as frost.
The other party had rescued Xueqi, which meant that they had been secretly following them.
Chapter
In other
1976.
words,
weeks.
The other
Time
party had
flew
heard
by.
everything they
Night
had just
gradually
said.
fell. What should we
Sky
do now?
Dragon Mountain Range
The mermaid
was actually
princess
more
looked at
dangerous
Qin
at
Fei
night
Yong and Qin
because there
Rushuang
were
and
many
asked in a
poisonous
panic.
insects,
Qin
such
Fei
as
Yong
poisonous
grabbed the
snakes,
mermaid princess'
scorpions,
hand and smiled.
and spiders that
Even if
appeared at night.
Xueqi wants to take
If one
revenge
wasn't
on me
careful,
and reveals my
one would
identity,
fall into their
it doesn't
hands.
matter. Even
You're still
detoxification
smiling so
pills couldn't
easily.
detoxify
Qin
many
Rushuang
poisonous
glared
insects.
at Qin Fei Yong
So at
angrily.
night,
Qin Fei Yong and the others were even more
we can't
careful.
be careless about this.
A whole day passed.
What if the person
and
who
they were about
rescued
to enter the
Xueqi
depths
is
of
Feng
Sky
Yuan's
Dragon
lackey?
Mountain Range?
Fire
The
Lotus
beasts
added.
they encountered were far from
Feng
comparable
Yuan?
to those at the
Qin
periphery.
Fei Yong was stunned.
Occasionally, after
They would
thinking for a
encounter a
moment,
half-stepped
he shook his
divine
head
lord.
and said,
Without
"I don't think it's
exception.
him."
Whenever
How
they
do you
encountered
know?
such a beast,
Qin Rushuang
the group would
asked.
choose to take a detour.
Think about it.
During this
In
period,
the eyes of Feng Yuan and the
Yun
others,
also wanted to
a
attack
nobody
Qin
like
Fei
Xueqi
and the
is
others
not
from
worthy
behind
of their
several
rescue.
times. Qin
But it was
Feiyang
easily
said,
resolved by Qin
"You're
Feiyang.
right."
Moreover,
Fire Lotus nodded.
every time Qin Feiyang
what?
resolved a crisis,
We're not Feng
it was
Yuan.
as if it was an accident.
How do we know what
as
he's
if it was
thinking?
just a coincidence.
Qin Rushuang
After
said,
failing again and again,
"Actually,
although
you don't
Nie
have to
Yun was a
worry.
little annoyed,
If the
he didn't
ancestor
take it
used
to
to have a
heart.
certain status
Because
in the
in
Ninth
his
Heaven
opinion,
Palace, it was a
it may be a good thing
coincidence.
for us if his
Boom.
identity is exposed."
Midnight.
The five
Qin
of them
Feiyang
finally
said.
entered the depths.
Qin Rushuang said,
According to the current
"What if
situation,
Father has turned
we
against
must
the
be the
Ninth Heaven
first to
Palace?
arrive at Nine Heaven
I'll
Palace.
say it again.
Counter
Nie Yun
soldiers with
smiled.
arms,
It's all
water with
thanks
an
to
earth
Brother
weir.
Nye. Otherwise,
No matter what
we
the
would still
relationship
be wandering
between the
around the
ancestor and
periphery.
the Ninth Heaven
Qin
Palace is,
Feiyang said,
I won't let any of you get hurt.
No. Qin
With Brother
Feiyang
Zhang's
smiled.
strength, even
What an
without
arrogant
me,
guy.
he would have
Qin
already
Rushuang
entered the
rolled
depths.
her eyes.
But there was a hint
quickly
of a
waved his
smile in the
hand,
depths of her eyes,
looking very humble.
because she knew that if they were in
suddenly
danger,
said,
Qin
"Listen,
Feiyang would
is there a
definitely be the
battle
first
sound
one
in
to stand
front?
in front of everyone.
Battle?
But then
Qin
again,
Feiyang
don't
and
you
the
think
others
that
were
saving
taken
someone
aback.
without a word
They
is a little
calmed down
familiar?
and listened carefully.
Qin Feiyang
frowned
gradually
and said,
a trace of
"Familiar."
surprise crawled on their
Qin
faces as
Rushuang
they
and
looked
the
at
other
the depths
two
of
were
the mountain in
suspicious.
front of them. I remember
Over
that
there,
Mu Tianyang
there was
and the
indeed a
demon
battle
ancestor
sound.
used to do this
But
kind of
because
thing
of the
before.
distance,
They could only
Qin
vaguely hear
Feiyang
it.
said,
Is
"Mu
it a human
Tianyang?
fight?
Or is
demon
it a fierce
ancestor?
battle between beasts?"
Hearing these two names,
Nie Yun
Qin
frowned.
Rushuang and the mermaid
Is there a
princess's
difference?
eyes suddenly trembled.
Fire Lotus
The
was
dusty
suspicious.
memories also
Of course
surged
there
like
is
a
a
tide.
difference.
If it's a
Actually,
fierce
we
battle
can't
between
put all our
beasts,
attention on
then
Feng
it's
Yuan.
nothing. After all,
But if it's a
we
human
still
fight,
have some old
it
rivals
means that
in the
someone
ancient
is
world.
walking in front of us.
They are all
Nie
more
Yun
difficult to
said,
deal with than Feng
"Walking in
Yuan.
front of us?
Now that the name Jiang
Impossible.
Haotian has spread,
Along
I
the
think
way,
they should be showing
we
up
haven't
soon.
been delayed at all."
Qin
Who
can run
Feiyang
ahead
said.
of us. Not only
Fire
was he not
Lotus said,
nervous, but there was
Xueqi
also
shook his
some
head and smiled.
anticipation in his eyes.
Little sister Fire
Can
Lotus,
you stop being
there is
so
always
careless
someone
all the
better
time?
than you.
Let's
We
not
cannot
talk about
be too
Mu
careless.
Tianyang first.
Fire
You know
Lotus
the demon
nodded.
ancestor's
Qin
methods
Rushuang
better than
added,
anyone else.
"Ignore the battle
With a
over
heaven-defying divine
Let's
artifact,
continue on our
you
way.
can't do anything to him
Compared to
except
first
open up the
place,
slaughter zone.
nothing else mattered."
Qin Rushuang
Yes.
said angrily.
Nie Yun nodded
Qin
and
Feiyang
continued to
smiled
lead
and
the
said,
way.
Hasn't
Qin
the demon
Feiyang
ancestor
and the other
turned
three
over a new
followed
leaf?
closely behind. That's just
Although
his
the direction they were
one-sided
heading
story.
towards was slightly
Do you
different
still
from the
believe
direction of the
it?
battle,
Qin
they were still
Rushuang
roughly in
said
the same
angrily.
direction.
All right. Let's
The
not
closer
talk
they
about
got,
this for now.
the clearer the
Let's
sounds
be
of battle
prepared for our
became.
identities to be
Wait.
exposed.
It seems like
Qin
humans and
Feiyang
dire
said.
beasts are fighting.
Although it was only
Nie
Qin
Yun
Rushuang
suddenly
suddenly
braked
braked
and
and
ancestor
stopped.
and Empyrean Palace had
He
turned
looked in
against
the
each other.
direction of the battle
If it was
and said
true
in
and
a
their
deep
identities
voice.
were exposed,
It
the
does seem like a
situation would become
human's aura.
extremely serious.
Qin Rushuang
In
whispered.
fact, it was
There
not that he
really
was
is
not
someone
worried,
walking in front
but
of
he
us.
did not want to show
Who
it.
is it?
Because
Why
now,
is he so
he was the
powerful?
pillar of support
Fire
in
Lotus
everyone's
frowned.
hearts. If
Why
even
don't we
he
go and
panicked,
take a look?
the people around
If
him
it's
would
a
definitely
difficult
panic
character,
even more.
we have to get rid of him
Therefore,
as soon as
he has
possible.
to remain calm and calm
Otherwise,
to stabilize everyone's
I'm afraid the
hearts.
first place will fall into his hands.
Nie Yun
Chapter
suggested,
1969.
That won't do.
At the same
Qin
time,
Rushuang
immediately
Sky Dragon
said,
City. Qin
Jade
Feiyang
Zither
glanced
Tower.
at Nie Yun
On
and
the
his
7th
eyes
floor,
flashed. In a room,
this person
the
was
fragrance
really
of
looking
tea
for
filled the
opportunities
air.
at any
A
time.
young man sat
On the
beside the coffee
surface,
table.
Nie Yun was
holding an
fighting for the
exquisite
first
teacup
place,
and slowly
but in
tasting
fact,
it. He was
this
creating
person was 7
opportunities.
feet tall.
Because
With
a
a
high-nosed
high-nosed
bridge
bridge
and
out,
golden eyes
Nie
that seemed to
Yun
be
would have the
cast from
opportunity
gold
to
leaf.
plot against them
Two
behind
thick
their
eyebrows,
backs.
like two
How
sharp
could they let him
swords,
succeed with such
exuded an
petty
astonishing
tricks?
sharpness.
It's better
If
not to
Qin
go.
Feiyang was here,
After all,
he would
this is
definitely
already
recognize
deep in
him
the
at a
Sky
glance.
Dragon Mountain range.
He was Mu Tianyang.
If it's a monarch
At this
god-level dire
moment,
beast,
Mu
then we
Tianyang
will
had
be
already
courting
taken
death
off
if we
his
go
dragon
there.
robe, wearing a purple
Feiyang
robe
said
and
calmly.
a purple crown. Nie Yun
However,
was quite annoyed.
his
but he
temperament
did
did
not
not
change at all.
Brother
He
Zhang's
sat there like an
consideration is
emperor,
reasonable,
emitting a terrifying and oppressive
we should
aura.
go and take
Duh.
a look.
Suddenly,
Xueqi shook his head.
there was a knock on the
Why?
door.
Mu
Qin Feiyang
Tianyang
turned his
looked up at
head
the
and
door
looked at
and said,
Xueqi suspiciously.
The door
Xueqi
was pushed
said,
open.
If the direction
and
is
another young
correct,
man in purple
then the place
strode
of battle
into the
should be
room.
the Black
After
Dragon
closing
Lake.
the door, the young
Black
man in
Dragon
purple
Lake?
quickly walked in front
front of the man and said
raised his
respectfully,
head in bewilderment.
"Greetings, ancestor."
Although he and Fire
Since he
Lotus
would
had been to the
address
Black
Mu
Dragon Lake
Tianyang as
before,
such,
they had
the
used the
identity
altar
of the
to
young man
teleport
in
there,
purple was
so they did
naturally
not know
revealed.
the exact location. What
Mu
kind of
Tianyang
place is the
asked,
Black Dragon Lake?
"How is it?"
Mu
Yun
Qing
looked
said,
at Xueqi
not
in
only Qin
confusion,
Fei Yang,
but
the
the
mermaid
mermaid
princess and
this
Qin
Black
Rushuang
Dragon
also
Lake
came
is
to
not
the ancient
simple.
world.
There is a half-step
Mermaid,
monarch
Qin
god-level
Rushuang.
black dragon lurking
One
in it.
is Qin Fei Yang's
As he
most beloved
spoke,
woman, and
he
the other is
glanced at
Qin
Qin
Beishan's
Fei Yang with a
biological
meaningful
daughter.
look.
It's not
Black
strange that they
Dragon.
entered the ancient
Yun
world.
was shocked.
I'm most
Let's
concerned
go
about
and
the
take a
white-eyed
look.
wolf,
Qin
Tang
Fei
Hai,
Yang suddenly
and the
waved
others.
his hand and swept up Fire
Mu
Lotus and
Tianyang
Qin
said,
Rushuang. flying in that direction.
But I think they should be cultivating in the
saw
ancient
this and
castle.
quickly followed.
Mu Qing said.
Smiled.
Mu Tianyang
Brother
took a sip of tea.
You even know a place
shook his
like
head
the Black
inside.
Dragon Lake.
I thought that
It
Qin
seems
Fei
like
Yang
you know
would
the
stay in the great
situation of
Qin
the
for at
Sky
least a
Dragon
few years
Mountain
before
range
entering
very
the
well.
ancient world.
I
didn't expect it to be so fast.
He smiled.
Mu Qing
Been
snorted
here before?
coldly.
Coming to the
Yan's eyes
ancient
went
castle
wide,
is
and
courting
he said in
death.
surprise.
Courting
Brother
death?
Hua, are you sure?
Haven't you suffered
Hua
enough
nodded.
at his hands?
I thought that you
still
found
dare to
someone to inquire
underestimate
about
him?
it, but I didn't expect you to come
raised
here
his
personally.
eyebrows and said angrily.
You're amazing, ancestor.
Yan's face was
Please
full of
calm your
admiration.
anger.
Mu
You
Qing's
flatter me.
expression changed
Hua
as she
Yi
said
said
with a
hurriedly.
faint smile.
Remember,
Yun turned his
never
head to look at
underestimate
Qin Fei
him.
Yang's back.
In the past,
And there was a trace
it
of
was because I
seriousness in the depths of his
underestimated him
eyes.
that I ended up in such a miserable state.
Originally,
Mu
he
Tianyang
thought that
snorted
among this
coldly.
group of people,
Mu
only
Qing
Qin
will
Fei
bear
Yang
this in
was
mind.
difficult to deal with.
Mu Qing
Because
replied
Fire Lotus
respectfully.
and the other two
Mu
had not
Tianyang's
displayed their
expression
outstanding
eased a lot as
strength
he
all
asked.
day.
Is there
However,
anything
he
else?
did not expect.
Mu Qing
This
said
Hua Yi had
he took
actually
out the
come to the
Juku
Sky
Yellow
Dragon
Dragon
elixir
Mountain
and
range,
prepared to cooperate
and he
with
even
Xueqi
came to the depths.
This
It
is
seemed
indeed
that
his
this
style.
person was not as
Mu
simple as he looked
Tianyang
on the
raised
surface.
his eyebrows. The distance
However,
was getting closer
this
and
matter
closer.
has already been
The
ruined
battle
by
fluctuations
me.
could
Mu
also be
Qing
clearly
sneered.
sensed.
What do you
Dragon
mean?
might.
Mu Tianyang was
Yan's
stunned
gaze
and looked
trembled.
at Mu Qing curiously.
There was an extremely
Mu
pure
Qing
dragon might
briefly
in this
explained
battle
the situation
fluctuation.
at that time.
Hua Yi said,
Fool.
Brother Jiang,
After hearing
it seems
this,
that someone
Mu
is fighting with the
Tianyang
Black
not
Dragon.
only did not praise him,
However,
but also became
Qin Fei
angry.
Yang did not seem to hear
Ancestor,
it, as he
did I
stared
do
in the
something
direction of
wrong?
the Black Dragon Lake. His
Mu
gaze as
Qing
gloomy as
frowned.
water.
Wrong. Qin Rushuang's
Very
face
wrong.
was also
You
extremely
actually
ugly.
used divine gems
However,
to trade for the
Nye Yun
Juku
and
Yellow
Hua Yi
Dragon
behind
elixir.
the two did not notice.
Don't you think this is a
But
reckless
Fire
waste
Lotus
of
at the
God's
side
gift?
sensed something
To
and
be
transmitted
honest,
her voice.
compared with Qin Fei Yang,
Sister
you are
Rushuang,
not just a
what are
little
you
bit
guys
better.
doing? What a
Mu
familiar
Tianyang
aura.
was furious.
Qin Rushuang
I also
secretly
thought
transmitted
about
her
this.
voice.
Her
Qin
eyes
Fei
full
Yang
of
offered
disgust.
soul stones. That's
If
right.
I went to Qin Fei
It's
Yang,
him.
his offer
Qin
would
Fei
definitely
Yang
be
said in
lower
a
than
deep
Qin
voice.
Fei Yang's.
Who?
Otherwise,
Fire Lotus was
why would
bewildered.
Shangguan Qiu cooperate
What kind of
with
person
us?
could make Qin Fei
What's
Yang
more,
and Qin
I did
Rushuang
this to
so
suppress
resentful?
him.
Think
Mu
about it.
Tianyang. If Shangguan
Qin Fei
Qiu
Yang
really
said
agreed to
word by
cooperate with
word
him,
and transmitted
he
his
would
voice.
get a lot of soul stones in the
What?
time formation of the
It's
ancient
actually
castle.
him. Wouldn't his
Fire
cultivation
Lotus was
improve by
shocked.
leaps and
Qin
bounds?
Fei Yang secretly
Mu
said,
Qing felt very
now
wrong.
I'm finally sure
Although
that he was
you
the
are
one
right,
who saved
you can't
Xueqi.
use divine gems.
Humph.
Qin Fei
He's
Yang
still
needs soul
going
stones,
against us.
so do we.
It seems that the
You
lesson
can
we
also
taught him
use
back
soul
then was
stones
not
to trade.
enough. As long as
Qin
your share is
Rushuang
lower than
snorted
Qin
coldly.
Fei Yang's.
Clang.
For example,
Just as
if
Qin
Qin Fei
Rushuang's
Yang and
voice
Shangguan
fell,
Qiu
a
split
deafening
50 to 50,
metallic sound
then
came
we
from the
can split it
direction of
40
the
to
Black
60.
Dragon Lake. In this
Following
way,
it was a monstrous
Shangguan Qiu
evil
will still
aura.
cooperate with us,
This is
right?
Mu
Bloodblade's
Tianyang
aura.
said angrily.
Qin Rushuang's
This
gaze trembled.
Mu Qing was
Not
stunned.
good.
At that
He
time,
must be trying to
he only
snatch
wanted
Black
to suppress
Dragon's
Qin
divine
Fei Yang.
soul.
So he
Qin
did not
Fei
think so
Yang
much.
secretly shouted
After
coldly,
pondering for a
and
while,
without hesitation,
Mu Qing looked
he
at Mu
used the
Tianyang and
attainment
said,
formula.
How about I
His
talk to
speed
Shangguan
directly
Qiu
soared
again?
several times.
Forget
And
it.
in the blink of an eye,
Businessmen hate
he
people who go
disappeared
back
from
on their
Hua Yi
words the
and Nye
most.
Yun's sight. In their eyes,
This kind of
Nye
person
Yun
is
was
very
dumbfounded.
unreliable.
Hua Yi
If we
also
change
had
our
a bitter
mind now
smile.
and talk to her again,
This person
I
was
think she
really
would rather
terrifying when he
cooperate
went
with Qin Fei
crazy.
Yang than us.
Above the Black Dragon
Mu
Lake,
Tianyang rubbed
at
his
this
forehead and
moment,
said,
a young
Mu
man in
Qing
purple
lowered his
clothes
arms
and a
and said,
purple crown stood against the
Ancestor,
wind.
I'm sorry.
Above his
It's
head,
my fault.
a blood
I
red
didn't
dagger
think
was
it through.
suspended. If
Mu
it was not Mu
Tianyang said,
Tianyang and
It's good
Bloodblade,
that you know
who
you are
else
wrong.
could it be?
Think more
Opposite.
before you do things
Black
in the
Dragon
future.
looked at Bloodblade.
Don't be impulsive.
His huge body trembling.
Yes.
And his huge
Mu
eyes were
Qing
filled
replied.
with fear.
Mu
On the other
Tianyang
side,
pondered for a while
a
and
man
said,
and a woman were
Actually,
standing together.
this matter hasn't reached
it was
the point of no
Xueqi and Mu
return.
Qing.
Ancestor,
Xueqi looked at
what's
Mu
your
Tianyang
plan?
and Bloodblade
Mu Qing was
and was also
suspicious.
shocked. Don't we
But
still
Mu
have the
Qing's
9
expression
turns
did not
dragon
change
blood
at all.
elixir?
And there was a
Let's
strange
cooperate
light
with
in his
Shangguan
eyes.
Qiu first.
Suddenly,
When we taste the dessert, we will show the 9 turns
the corner
dragon
of his
blood
mouth
elixir.
raised slightly.
When I
looked at
think
Mu
about it,
Tianyang
she
and said
probably
with a
won't
smile,
refuse to trade
He's
with soul
almost here.
stones. Is
Mu
that so?
Tianyang said.
Mu Tianyang
That makes
chuckled,
sense.
looked at Black
Mu
Dragon
Qing
and
nodded
said,
with a smile
I've
and
played
said,
with you for so long,
also, it's
there
time
are
to send
potential
you on your
elixirs,
way.
potential
Black
elixirs.
Dragon turned and
Mu
fled.
Tianyang
Yang was
Whoosh.
angry again and
But
shouted,
Bloodblade instantly
I said
arrived
you were
behind
stupid.
Black Dragon.
You really
and
don't
directly
know
cut
it.
Black Dragon's body in half.
Dragon
Muqin
blood
was
poured
stunned.
down like a
Was he
waterfall,
wrong again?
dyeing the
Do
sky
you know
red.
why Qin Fei Yang
Half-step
didn't use the
Divine
potential
Lord's
elixir
elixir
but the
pants.
9 turns yellow
Mu
dragon
Tianyang
elixir?
smiled contemptuously.
It's because the
Put away
potential
Bloodblade,
elixir is
and
too
then waved his
heaven-defying.
hand, and Black
Don't you know
Dragon's
that
body
treasuring
suddenly
a jade ring
disappeared.
is a crime? Mu Tianyang.
Once the treasure pavilion knows about the existence of the potential
murderous
elixir,
roar could be heard.
what do you think they will do?
Mu Tianyang looked
They will
up,
definitely
and
think
a
of
smile
ways to
appeared
force
on
us
his
to hand
face.
over the elixir
Mu
recipe.
Qing also flew to Mu Tianyang's side with Xueqi.
Even if the treasure
and then
pavilion
looked up.
doesn't do that,
Mu
what
Qing's
about
eyes
others?
were full of playfulness.
Once they find
However,
out the origin of the potential
Xueqi's eyes
elixir
contained a trace
will
of
they let
hatred
us
that
go?
could not be
Mu
dissolved.
Qing,
Swoosh.
oh Mu Qing,
Very
you
soon.
really have to use your
Three
brain
figures
properly.
landed in the void opposite
Right now,
Mu Tianyang.
we are no longer in the
It was
great Qin or the
Fei-Yang
forgotten
and the other
continent.
two. We are in the
Fei-Yang
ancient
looked
world.
at the dragon blood
In
all
this
over the
place,
ground.
we don't
And
have
his
any
eyes
backing,
suddenly darkened.
and our strength is even more like
Tianyang
ants.
looked at Qin Fei-Yang
If we
and
are
Qin
not
Rushwang,
careful,
and
we will be
secretly
smashed
laughed.
to pieces.
I didn't expect that
Mu
we would meet in
Tianyang
such a
looked at
way.
Mu Qing as if he
Telepathic
expected better from him.
message?
Qin Fei-Yang and Qin
If I
Rushwang were
encounter
stunned.
any problems in the
It
future,
seemed that Mu
I will
Tianyang
consider
also
it
knew
thoroughly.
that the big shots of Nine Heavens
Qing
Palace were
nodded.
secretly watching at this
All
time.
right.
All
Where's
right.
Black Dragon?
Is there anything
Qin
else? Fei-Yang secretly
Mu Tianyang
asked.
waved his hand and
I've
asked.
already killed him.
Yes. I
Mu
saved a woman
Tianyang
from Qin
secretly
Fei-Yang's
laughed.
hands.
Mu Qing
Qin
said.
Fei-Yang's eyes
A
were full
woman?
of anger.
Mu
I
Tianyang
just stole
was
your
suspicious.
prey. Mu
Yet,
Qing
you
waved his
killed
hand,
my younger brother,
and
the
the
woman
woman
I
I
loved
appeared
the
on the
most.
ground out of thin
So the
air.
person who should
It
be
was
angry is
Xueqi.
me. At
Mu
this
Tianyang
moment,
secretly
she was still
said,
unconscious.
I'm very sorry
Who is
about
she?
Shen Mei's
Mu
death.
Tianyang
But
sized up
Heavenly
with
Lord
Xueqi
Mu
and
deserves
asked.
to die.
Her
Not
name is
only does
Xueqi.
Heavenly Lord Mu
I
deserve
don't know
to die,
who she is exactly,
but you also deserve
but
to
it
die.
seems that she is
Qin
engaged to
Fei-Yang
Qin
said.
Fei-Yang.
Yes.
However,
I do
this
deserve to
engagement
die.
seems to be fake.
But the heavens
Mu
don't
Qing
accept me.
said.
Mu Tianyang
Engagement?
laughed. Mu
Mu
Tianyang was
Tianyang,
stunned.
aren't you
I
ashamed
think
to
she
say
seems
this?
to hate Qin
If it
Fei-Yang
weren't
very
for Qin
much,
Yuan's help,
so I saved her
would
along
you
the
have
way.
survived? Mu Qing
Qin
said.
Rushwang was
Mu
secretly
Tianyang
angry.
pondered for a moment,
Yes.
and a
I'm
cold
very
light
grateful
flashed
to
in
Qin
Qin
Yuan.
Then let's
It's also
keep her.
because of this that
Perhaps
I didn't
she will be a
disclose your
useful chess
identities.
piece. Mu
In the ancient
Tianyang
castle,
secretly said. Everyone went back to cultivating. Only Qin Fei-Yang and Fire Lotus did not cultivate. Chapter 1977.
Fire Lotus could not cultivate because she could not.
Do you think I'm an idiot?
Qin Fei-Yang leaned against the
Mu
wall
Tianyang,
absent-mindedly.
are a grateful person?
He lowered his
Qin
head and
Fei-Yang
crossed his
sneered.
arms, as if he was thinking about
You,
something.
Qin Fei-Yang,
Fire
know me
Lotus
best.
asked suspiciously.
That's right. What are you thinking
didn't
about?
reveal your
Why are you
identity.
so engrossed?
It has nothing to do with
I'm
Qin
thinking
Yuan
about
saving
Gongzi
me.
Feng and Gao
Because I want you
Xiaolong.
to reveal your
Why haven't they
identity
sent me a
yourself?
message yet? It's
Did
more
something
interesting to
happen?
do this than me
Qin
revealing
Fei-Yang
it. Frowned.
Mu Tianyang
I don't
thought.
think so. You want me to
Fire
reveal
Lotus
my
muttered.
identity? Time
Don't
passed.
say that I'm
It
looking
was
down
dawn.
on you.
But can you do it? Finally. Qin Fei-Yang's
sneered.
image crystal rang.
We'll see if I
He
can
was
do it or
refreshed
not.
and quickly took it
Mu
out.
Tianyang
A
smiled
virtual
playfully,
image appeared.
then turned
It
around
was
and
Gongzi
left.
Feng. Wait.
You must
Qin
have waited
Fei-Yang
for a long
raised his
time.
eyebrows. Brother Jiang.
You want
to kill me? Gongzi Feng
Then
smiled.
you have to think about it
However,
carefully. Although he was
because
smiling,
if you don't use all your
his
means,
forehead was full
it's
of sweat.
impossible to kill me. What are you doing?
Mu Tianyang
Qin
stopped in his
Fei-Yang
tracks,
looked at him in
but he
confusion.
didn't turn around.
Gongzi Feng shook
You're
his
not
head and
worth
sighed.
killing.
I
want
still
to know where the demon
underestimated my
ancestor,
father's hatred for
Long,
me.
and Dong
It's really
Zhengyang
not
are
easy
now.
to find out this information.
Qin Fei-Yang transmitted his
mean?
voice.
Qin
Them?
Fei-Yang was puzzled.
I don't know either.
I went to look
Mu
for him,
Tianyang
but
shook
he
his
didn't
head.
want to see me at all.
Qin Fei-Yang was
In the
stunned
end,
and said
I had
suspiciously,
no choice but to
you
try
enter the
Fengzi
ancient
Han.
world together.
Although
How can
my
you
elder
not know?
sister didn't like me,
I'm also
fortunately,
very puzzled about
I wasn't
this.
wary of her.
Mu Tianyang
I got some
lowered
very
his head,
useful information
his
from her.
eyes full of suspicion.
Gongzi Feng
What do you mean?
smiled. Qin Fei-Yang asked secretly.
Your elder sister's name
At
is
that time,
Fengzi Han?
not long after we
And
entered the ancient
you
world,
probably don't
a
know that the
mysterious
master of the
force
Jade
suddenly
Zither
appeared.
Pavilion is my
The
elder
few of us
sister.
fainted on the spot.
When Mu
Gongzi
Qing and
Feng
I
said,
woke up, we found that we
"So
were
it's
already
her."
near Sky Dragon
Qin
City,
Fei-Yang was
but there was no
surprised.
trace of the demon
My elder
ancestor,
sister's ability and
Dong Zhengyang
talent far
and Embark.
surpass Feng Zijuan.
I've been looking for them
in
for
the
the past
9
half a
Heavens
year,
Palace,
but there was no
she's
news at all.
definitely a monstrous figure.
It's like they disappeared
Do
from
you
the
know
world.
the heaven ranking and
Mu
earth
Tianyang
ranking of the
turned to
9
look at
Heavens
Qin
Palace?
Fei-Yang and said
Gongzi
secretly,
Feng asked.
Mysterious
Qin Fei-Yang
power.
shook his head.
Qin Fei-Yang
The heaven
frowned.
ranking and earth
Mu
ranking are the
Tianyang
most
pondered and
important
said,
rankings in the
I'm
9
guessing
Heavens
that someone
Palace.
is trying to separate
Those
us
who
on
can enter the
purpose.
heaven ranking and earth
Are you
ranking
talking
are the
about
strongest
Ice Dragon
disciples
or
of the
Small
9
Beast?
Heavens Palace.
Qin Fei-Yang
My elder
said,
sister is on the
Other
heaven
than
ranking.
them,
I don't think I can
we'll talk
find
about the
anyone
details
else after you enter the 9
Tianyang
Heavens
said.
Palace. What are these
Right
two
now,
bastards
I'll
trying
tell
to
you
do?
a very important
Qin
piece of
Fei-Yang
news.
frowned.
Gongzi
What are you
Feng's face
trying to
turned
do?
gloomy.
In my opinion,
What
in their
news is
eyes,
it that made you
we are
so
just
worried?
a
few toys for them to play with.
Fei-yong was suspicious.
Mu Tianyong
snorted
said
coldly.
solemnly, "My
Let's not
grandfather
talk
and
about
father are
this
going
for
to make
now.
a move against
Do you
in
know how the
tomorrow's
inner
test."
demons died?
What?
Qin Fei-yong was shocked. What?
Fire Lotus
The
frowned.
inner demons
They're
are
going
dead.
to tamper with the
Mu
test?
Tianyong was shocked.
But they
Yes.
won't make a move.
Not only did the
personally.
inner demons
Because
die,
during the test,
but my cousin
there
also
will be
died
many
on the third
important
level.
figures in the Nine Heavens
Qin
Palace
Fei-yong
watching.
nodded.
They won't
I
dare to
don't
be
know
too
about
presumptuous.
that.
That's because
Gongzi
when we
Feng
entered the
said.
divine sight,
Then
The
how
fire
are they going to
python
make
sent
a
us
move?
to the ancient world.
Qin Feiyong didn't
But
understand.
Mu
They've
Tianyang
secretly
finished
bribed
speaking
a
and
group
frowned
of
again.
people.
But
These
what?
people are all here
Qin
to
Feiyong
participate in the
asked
test.
secretly. That's
Moreover,
not right.
they're all elites
Back then,
in this test.
Dong Zhengyang
Their
clearly
strength
said
can't
that they
be
wouldn't
underestimated.
Can the
I'll
Eye
draw
of
up a
Destiny
name list and have Gao
Mu
Xiaolong send it
Tianyang
to you.
thought.
The Eye
Gongzi
of Destiny
Feng
said. Qin
Okay.
Feiyong muttered.
Qin Feiyong nodded and told Gongzi Feng the coordinates. Mu Tianyang said
Then
telepathically.
that's all for now.
Wait,
Be
can't
careful
you and
tomorrow.
the inner demons communicate
Gongzi Feng
telepathically?
reminded and his figure
That's
quickly
right.
disappeared.
But I
Qin
can't sense
Feiyong
his
also
existence.
kept the image crystal
Qin
and looked at
Feiyong
Fire
said.
Lotus with a smile.
Then it seems
See,
like Dong
no matter who
Zhengyang's
it
Eye
is,
of
they have their
Destiny
value.
isn't very accurate.
If Gongzi Feng didn't
Although
help
I'm
us
very
this time,
happy that the
we
inner
would have
demons
been
are
caught
dead,
off guard.
I still want to comfort
Gongzi
you.
Feng is really
My
good.
condolences.
But I'm more curious.
Let's have some fun in the
these
ninth
people that
heaven
are willing
palace
to
in
be
the future?
Gongzi Feng's pawns.
After Mu Tianyang
Fire
finished
Lotus's
speaking,
eyes
he
flashed
turned
with a
around
cold
and
light.
left with a face full of
Literature
schadenfreude.
Hall. Let's go too. Mu Qing looked at Xueqi and said.
Chapter 1970.
Then she left without looking
About
back.
half an hour passed.
Xueqi looked
Brother
at Qin
Zhang,
Feiyong
where are
and said
you?
telepathically,
A voice that
"Let me
sounded
ask
like a
you,
thief entered
were
the
you
castle.
the one who saved Gao
Qin
Xiaoyi
Feiyong
and helped Gao
immediately left
Xiaolong
the
destroy
castle
my
and
Gua
appeared
family?
at the peak of the mountain.
Qin Feiyong
The
said.
waning moon hung
Didn't
high
Mu
in the sky.
Tianyang and the others
The
tell you?
surroundings were
Gua
quiet.
Xueqi said angrily.
In front of Qin Feiyong,
I want you to answer me
Gao
personally.
Xiaolong hid his presence
It
and
was
looked
me.
around like a thief.
Qin Feiyong nodded.
I'm here.
If you don't want to marry
said.
me,
Gao
you can say it
Xiaolong's
directly.
eyes lit up.
I won't
He
stop
quickly
you.
ran to Qin
I can
Feiyong
even
and took
destroy
out
the
a
marriage
beast skin
contract
scroll.
in front of you.
Qin Feiyong took
But
the
why are
beast
you
skin
so
scroll and
ruthless?
asked suspiciously,
Xueqi's eyes
what are you
trembled
doing?
and tears flowed down her
Gongzi
face.
Feng told me to be careful. It won't
Qin
be good if
Feiyong was
someone
about to
follows
say
us.
something.
Gao
There's
Xiaolong
no need to
said
say
in a low
anything.
voice.
I'll make
Qin
you and Gao
Feiyong was
Xiaolong
slightly
pay for
surprised.
this blood debt sooner or
He
later.
shook his head and said with a
Gua
smile.
Xueqi smiled
That's very
coldly and
thoughtful,
turned to
but it
chase
is
after
indeed
Mu
necessary.
Tianyang and Huayu.
Tell Gongzi
Only
Feng
tell her that
we
you
should
helped
try
Gao
not to meet in the
Xiaolong destroy
future.
the Gua family.
Even when we are
But don't
communicating,
tell her that the marriage
it's
contract
best to
was
hide
forged
in a
by
spatial
Guazi
divine
Xian.
object.
This Mu
After
Tianyang
Qin
is
Feiyong
really
finished
despicable.
speaking, he
Fire
opened the
Lotus
beast
said
skin
with
scroll
disgust.
and looked at it.
This is his
Spatial
usual style.
divine object.
He used
Gao
Xueqi's hatred for
Xiaolong
me
was
to make
stunned.
Xueqi a
He
sharp blade
smiled
in his
bitterly
hand.
and said, even Gongzi Feng doesn't have a
I
spatial
want to see
divine
what
object,
tricks he can play.
let alone me.
Qin
Is
Feiyong
that so?
snorted.
Qin
Whoosh.
Feiyong was
At
surprised.
this moment,
Yes.
Nye Yun
Gao
and Huayi
Xiaolong
finally
nodded.
arrived.
Qin Feiyong
Looking at the
pondered for a
dragon blood
while and
below,
said with a smile.
the two exchanged a
It
glance
seems
and
that
then
I have
looked
to
at
find a
Qin
spatial
Feiyong.
divine
Brother
object for
Zhang,
you.
where's the black
Gao
dragon?
Xiaolong was stunned when he
already
heard
been
this.
killed.
He quickly
Let's set
said,
off quickly.
Thank you, Brother
Otherwise, the
Zhang.
first place will
Qin
really be
Feiyong
snatched
waved
away.
his hand and continued to
Qin
look at the
Feiyong
beast skin
said
scroll.
solemnly.
There were
The
hundreds
hundreds
of
of
names
divine
monarch
recorded on
Black
it.
Dragon was actually
Behind
killed
each
by
name,
someone.
there was a detailed
Nye Yun was
introduction,
shocked and asked,
such as family
"Who is it?
background, cultivation,
So terrifying?
personality, etc.
I don't know.
Gongzi
Qin
Feng
Feiyong
said that
shook
most
his
people
head.
are not a threat to
Huayi
you.
looked at
Only
Qin
these
Feiyong
few.
meaningfully and cupped his fist.
Gao Xiaolong
Brother
pointed
Nye,
at the last
I'll
5
have to
names.
trouble you to continue opening the
Yun,
way. Qi Hong,
my pleasure.
Ping,
Nye
Zhu
Yun
Gu,
smiled.
Zhang Yunfei,
Qin
Xiao
Feiyong
Zhiyun
added.
Qin
Don't take
Feiyong looked
another
at them one by
detour.
one and his
No
expression
detours?
changed.
Nye
These
Yun
6
was
people were
stunned.
all perfect
Go
war gods,
straight ahead.
and they all had
Qin
powerful
Feiyong
family
looked in the
backgrounds.
direction Mu Tianyang
For example,
and the other two
the first
disappeared.
Nye Yun
His
was the
eyes
son
shining.
of a city lord.
Behind,
This city lord
3
was in
men
charge
and
of
one
a city
woman were
called
moving
Galaxy
as fast
City.
as lightning.
Not only
It was
did he have a
Zhang
group of
Yunfei
terrifying
and the other 3
experts
who had
under
been
his
tailing
command,
behind.
but his own
At this
cultivation
moment,
was also
They
impressive.
were all sweating
Gao
profusely
Xiaolong
and
said
panting like
solemnly,
oxen.
Other than these people,
What is Brother
they
Nye
have also
doing?
bribed some
Why
divine
did he
monarch
suddenly
realm
run
vicious
so
beasts.
fast?
Big
At this
Brother
rate,
Zhang,
even if
this
we
is
catch
not
up with
child's
them,
play.
we will be
You must be
exhausted
careful.
to death. What?
There are more ferocious beasts. Zhang
Qin
Yunfei
Feiyong
was
complained.
bewildered. Could
Yes,
it be that something
but we haven't
happened?
found out which
The
ferocious
fierce
beast
ghost
it
frowned.
is.
Hearing
Gao
this,
Xiaolong
Zhang
said,
Yunfei, one-eyed
Looks
dragon,
like they really
and
want
the
to
girl's
kill me
heart
this
sank.
time.
Qin
How is that
Feiyong took a
possible?
deep breath,
Brother
then
Nye
put away the
strength is
animal
stronger
skin
than
scroll
us.
and asked,
And
What's
he
your
even
sister's
has a
plan?
pinnacle divine artifact.
Young master asked
Even
a few
if he
friends to
encounters
take
any
care of her
danger,
during the examination.
he will definitely
so you
be
don't have to
fine.
worry.
The girl
However,
suddenly laughed.
I still hope that Big
True.
Brother Zhang will be
Zhang
able to lend me a
Yunfei
hand
and the
when
other
the time
2
comes.
nodded.
The girl transmitted transmitted her voice again.
Gao Xiaolong
It's just
said.
that those people bought by Feng
All
Yuan
right.
are probably
You
useless.
go back first.
Those people
Wait,
are originally
there's
trash.
something I should tell
the
you.
fierce ghost
Xueqi
laughed.
has also
That's
come
right.
to Sky Dragon City.
With their speed,
I'm
I think
afraid
she will
they are
also
still
participate
wandering
in
in
the
the
examination.
And
Even if they can
Fei-Yong
catch
said,
up with us, they can't help
Xueqi.
much.
Gao
However,
Xiaolong's eyes
although these
flashed with
people
a
are
cold
useless,
light.
the enemy who killed my grandfather
can play
I
a big
will not
role.
let her go.
One-eyed
Fei-Yong
dragon
said,
secretly sneered.
I won't stop you from taking revenge,
yes.
but you can't
With
be
these
impulsive.
beasts,
Jiang
I
Haotian
know
and his
this.
group.
Also,
No matter how
the
capable
examination's
they
location
won't be
will be
able
at
to
Sky
escape
Dragon
death.
Mountain Range.
And I think they are about
Gao
to take
Xiaolong
action.
said.
The fierce
Sky
ghost
Dragon
grinned.
Mountain Range?
Haha.
Qin
There are a
Fei-Yong
few
was
good young
stunned.
people in this
That's
year's
right.
assessment. During the
Nine
examination,
Heaven Palace.
you are not allowed
In the
to
main
use spatial
hall,
divine objects.
the black-haired old
or
man
even
looked
enter
at
them.
two of the images
You are
and
also
laughed
not allowed
happily.
to use the
These
transmission
two
altar.
images were of
And
Qin
naturally,
Fei Yang,
you are not allowed to have any
Tianyang,
outsiders
and the
to
others.
help you.
Yes.
The so-called
One
outsiders
has
are
the
those
strength
who are
to
not
kill a
participating
perfect
in the
war god.
examination.
The other has
the
the means
first
to
50
kill a
people to
half-step
reach the
monarch
stairway
god.
will be accepted as
These
inner
two
disciples.
already have the ability to shake
The
the
rest
earth
will be
board.
outer disciples.
I estimate that once
As
they
for the
enter
duration
Nine
of the
Heaven Palace,
examination, there will be
there are
changes
only
to the
2
earth
days.
board. The
Those
rest
who
of
have
the
not
people were
reached the
also
stairway
full of
in 2
smiles.
days will be eliminated. Everyone,
Gao
don't be
Xiaolong
happy too
explained.
early.
Feng
2
Yuan
days?
suddenly said.
Qin Fei Yang
Someone
frowned.
asked. With
He
these
knew
2
how big the
monstrous
Sky
talents,
Dragon Mountain
Hall
range
Master Feng
was.
Yuan,
Aren't you
rushing from
happy?
Sky Dragon City
Happy.
to Nine Heavens Palace
course
would not
I'm
be a
happy.
problem if he used
But
a
don't you
spatial
find
divine
it strange
object.
that the purple-clothed
However,
youth's
the
divine
rules
weapon
of the
is a bit too
examination
powerful?
forbade the use of
Feng
spatial
Yuan
divine
frowned.
objects.
That's true.
In that case,
that
2
bloody
days
blade
was
didn't
not
even
enough.
awaken and it
There were
killed
too
Hei
many
Long.
fierce beasts in
If
the
it
Sky
awakens,
Dragon Mountain
won't it
range,
be even more
and
terrifying?
each one of them was extremely
For
strong.
an unknown
In
person
the
to
depths
possess
of the
such a
mountain
terrifying
range,
divine
there were
item,
god monarch
it's
fierce
truly
beasts
inconceivable.
everywhere. For a
Some
divine
people
lord
began
level
to discuss
beast,
softly.
killing a war
Hall
god
Master
was as
Feng
simple as
Yuan,
crushing an
you are
ant.
in charge of the resource
Therefore,
hall.
it was
So you are
impossible
more
to cross
familiar
the
with
Sky
divine
Dragon
weapons
Mountain
than
range
us.
and reach the
Do you
stairway.
know the origin
Most
of that bloody
importantly,
blade?
those who
Someone
participated in the
asked.
examination
To
would
be
definitely
honest,
kill each
I've
other.
never heard of it.
This was undoubtedly
And because it
more
hasn't
difficult.
awakened,
I
it
can't
seemed like
determine
the
the
Nine
grade of
Heavens
that bloody
Palace's
blade.
examination was not
But
that
from the
easy
way
to
it killed
pass.
Hei Long,
To
I
be
guess
honest,
that this bloody blade
this
has surpassed
examination
the
is
pinnacle
more
divine
difficult
weapon
than the
level.
previous ones.
Feng Yuan
I
analyzed.
can already imagine the scene of
Beyond the
corpses
pinnacle
everywhere.
divine weapon.
Big Brother Jiang,
Then,
you
it's
must
a
not be
legendary
careless.
divine weapon?
Gao
The
Xiaolong
black-haired old
reminded.
man said.
Don't worry,
Feng Yuan
I
nodded.
will do my best.
It's most likely a
Qin Fei
legendary
Yang
divine
said.
weapon.
Gao Xiaolong
Then
nodded
we'll have to
and did not
investigate
linger.
this person's
He
identity.
opened a transmission
After
altar
all,
and left.
Even our Nine
Feng
Heavens
Yuan,
Palace
you
doesn't
guys
have
are
many
really
legendary
relentless.
divine weapons. However, if a few Perfection Realm battle gods want to kill
The
me,
black-haired
you
old
guys
man
are
said.
underestimating me.
Qin Fei Yang.
Suddenly,
Just
a
wait and
black-clothed
see.
man
You will
appeared in the
regret
hall
it.
and knelt on one
Qin
knee
Fei
before the
Yang looked at the
black-haired old
night
man.
sky and muttered.
Greetings, first
He
elder.
entered the ancient
Seeing
castle
this
and began
black-clothed
to
man
adjust
appear,
his state of mind.
Feng Yuan's
He
eyes
did not
flashed.
care about those who participated in the
The
examination.
black-haired old man
Only
looked
the
at the
fierce
black-clothed
beasts in the
man and
Sky
asked.
Dragon Mountain range
According
were
to
his
the
biggest
subordinate's
concern.
investigation, although the
There are
six-word
indeed
divine
several
formula could
accomplices of
ignore
Zhang
major
Haotian
realms,
slandering our
the
Nine
world
Heavens
was
Palace in
unpredictable.
some restaurants.
The black-clothed
What if a
man
powerful
said.
fierce beast jumped
Preposterous.
out? Even
Moreover,
if this person is
the
a
six-word
genius,
divine
we
formula
can't
was his
tolerate
trump
him.
card. He did
That's
not
right.
want to reveal it so
First elder,
easily.
I
After
suggest
all,
we kill him
Gao
immediately.
Xiaolong had said that the
Angry
important
shouts
figures
rang
of
out
Nine
in the main
Heavens
hall.
Palace would be watching the
Zhang
examination.
Haotian,
If he revealed the
do you see
six-word
this?
divine formula,
This is the result
it
of
would
going
definitely
against
cause
me.
a commotion.
Who do you think I am?
This was not what he wanted.
You dare to offend
Time
me?
flew by.
I have 10,000
Early
ways
morning.
to kill you.
The night
Feng
dispersed
Yuan
and
laughed
everything came
inwardly.
back to life. The black-haired old man
Outside the
raised his
western
head
city
and looked
gate.
at Qin Fei Yang
At
on the
this
screen
moment,
and frowned.
there was a sea of people.
First elder, at a glance,
There's nothing to hesitate
there were at least
about.
100,000
Our
people.
northern region doesn't
Do any
lack
of you have
talents.
any insider information?
Please give the order.
Where is the location
group
of the
urged.
examination? The black-haired old
This
man
kind of
didn't
thing
say
is confidential.
anything. How could
He looked
anyone
down
know?
at the black-clothed man
Everyone
and asked,
discussed as they
"Are
waited
you
for the
sure?
arrival of the
This
people from
subordinate
Nine
is
Heavens
sure."
Palace.
The
sun gradually rose from the horizon.
black-haired old man pondered
Swoosh.
for a while and said with a
Suddenly,
hoarse laugh,
a figure appeared in the
matter
sky
isn't
above
urgent.
the plane.
Let's wait
It
and
was a
see."
middle-aged man wearing a black robe.
Feng Yuan
He
was
was 7
stunned.
feet tall and
What
had a
did he
cold
mean?
face.
Wait and see.
His hands were
Wait
behind
and
his
see
back
what?
and his aura was
What was there to
unfathomable.
see?
The
The
others
Nine
also
Heavens
looked at the
Palace's law
black-haired old
enforcement
man with a
elder.
puzzled expression.
Phone one high.
The black-haired old
Everyone,
man smiled and
quiet
said
down.
indifferently,
The originally
"He's just
noisy
an early
plane
stage
instantly
war god.
fell into a dead
There's
silence.
no need to be so concerned."
Everyone looked at Feng One
Let's
High
wait
with
until the
eyes
end
full
of
of
the
respect.
examination. Feng One High
All right.
glanced at the crowd
Since
and
the
did not
first
ask
elder
if
had
anyone was
spoken,
present.
the others could
He said
only
directly,
accept helplessly.
"The location of the
Little
examination
bastard,
is in the
I'll
Sky
let you
Dragon
live for
Mountain
one more
range."
day.
Feng
What?
Yuan looked at Qin
Sky
Fei Yang,
Dragon Mountain
and his
range.
eyes were suffused with a
Once
wisp of
these
shocking
words came out,
viciousness. Everyone's face changed color and was filled with fear. At this moment,
moment. 2 men and 2 women walked out from the city gate side by side. Time flew by. They stood behind the crowd and looked up at Foam One High. Half of the assessment time had passed. Qin Feiyong and the others who had arrived late. 5 rushed without stopping. At this moment, and they were not everyone was in a state of panic and did not notice them. Mu Tianyong's group was still in front of them. They would definitely not be in the mood to pay attention to the 4 of them. They had been following behind Mu Tianyong's group. Sound transmission. Qin Rushuang frowned and sent a sound transmission. He is Feng Zijuan's father. Feiyong. Why don't you use the Qixing formula to surpass them and keep following behind them? Of course. If this continues, it is said that his cultivation has already surpassed the Divine Lord. Do you really want to get first place that much? Transcendental Divine Lord laughed secretly. Qin Feiyong was shocked. Wait a moment. 100,000 soul stones is enough for all of us to break through to the level of Who doesn't know how dangerous the Sky Dragon mountain range is? Who doesn't want it? Aren't you deliberately sending us to our deaths?
This is
everyone?
not fair.
Qin Fei
Although
Yang
the
was
previous
surprised.
examinations were
Yes.
also very cruel.
During this period of
Compared to
time,
this time,
we have been in
it is like
seclusion
heaven
in the
and
castle
earth.
and calculated
I can
carefully.
guarantee that no one in this
From the
examination will
pseudo-god to
come
the
back
level of war
alive.
god.
After a moment of
soul
silence,
stones are needed.
many people
But
began
from the
to
level
protest.
of war god to the level
Feng
of war god,
Wanhai was
one
expressionless
needs
and did not
10,000
speak.
soul stones.
He scanned the
Qin
crowd.
Rushuang secretly
Suddenly,
said.
When he saw Qin
10,000.
Fei Yang and the other
Qin
three,
Fei Yang was
a trace of
shocked.
killing intent
Could it be
flashed
that
in his
no one
eyes.
had broken through
However,
during this period of time?
He did not
It
look
turned
at them
out
for
that it
long
required
and
so many
immediately
soul
swept his
stones.
gaze over the others.
First, he swindled
Elder,
10,000
you are too
soul
much.
stones from
You
the
don't
blood
treat us as
python.
humans at all. Then, he looted the Gua family's treasure vault
location
and
of the
obtained another
examination
3 to
must be
4,000
changed.
soul stones.
That's right.
Finally, he
Even
killed
if
the
it is
2
your
black-clothed
nine-heaven
men
palace,
sent by
you
Guiyong
can't
and obtained
deliberately
another
harm
1,000
us.
soul stones.
Everyone
From
became
Qin Fei
angrier
Yang's
and
point of
angrier
view,
as they roared
this
at
was
Feng
already a
Wanhai.
large sum.
It is
However,
indeed a bit too
he
much.
didn't expect that it was
Hua Yi
just a
shook
drop
his
in the
head.
bucket.
Big brother
But what
Hua
was
Yi,
worth celebrating
are you
was that
also
he had
afraid?
obtained more than 50,000 soul
covered her
stones
mouth
from
and
killing
laughed.
Cripple. Sky
Thinking
Dragon
of this,
Mountain Range is the
Qin Fei
headquarters
Yang
of the
glanced
beasts
at
of the northern
Yun.
region. As
Do you
the
think
son
I
of
am
the
not
Star
afraid?
River City Lord,
Especially
he
in
should
the
have
depths.
more soul
A
stones
divine
than
lord
Cripple.
level beast is
Qin
enough
Fei
to
Yang
wipe out all of
suddenly
us
said,
here.
Brother
Hua
Hua
Yi sighed and
can I
looked up
ask
at
you a
Feng
question?
Wanhai,
What
frowning.
question? What are the people
The
of
two of
Nine
them
Heaven
were
Palace
stunned and
thinking?
looked
at him suspiciously.
Time passed breath
Qin
by
Fei
breath.
Yang asked,
A moment
how many
later,
soul stones do you need
Feng
to break
Wanhai
through from the
finally opened
pseudo-god's
his
mouth
mouth
and
and
said
God.
coldly, have you all said
The
enough?
two of them were
If you
stunned.
have,
What
then
is it?
shut up for this
Qin
seat.
Fei Yang was puzzled.
Everyone's pupils
Yun
shrank.
replied,
The plane
as long
once
as one
again
has
fell
broken
into
through to
dead
the
semi-divinity realm.
However,
They should know
although
something
everyone
like that.
no longer said anything,
To tell you the
their
truth,
eyes still expressed
in the
their
past,
dissatisfaction.
we've been following Master
the
and
location
living
of the
in seclusion
examination
in the mountains,
and how the examination
Thus,
will be conducted
we don't
is
know much
decided by
about
my
these
Nine
matters.
Heaven Palace. Qin
If
Fei
you
Yang
want to enter
smiled.
Nine Heaven Palace,
Fire Lotus
you
and
have to
Qin
accept
Rushuang
it.
nodded as well.
If you are
Yun
afraid,
said in
then don't
surprise,
go in.
Then you guys
This
can be
seat will not
considered as
stop
hidden
you.
experts.
Next, this
Sorry
seat
for
will
the
explain the
disrespect.
rules of the examination.
To put it nicely,
Feng Wanhai
he's a hidden
completely
expert.
ignored everyone's
To put it
protest
bluntly,
and continued to speak.
he's a country bumpkin
The
who
content
hasn't
was
seen
exactly
the world.
the same as what
Qin
Gong
Fei
Zhongfeng
Yang shook
had
his head and
inquired.
smiled bitterly.
Too much.
You can't say that. We can't even use spatial divine items. In today's
I give
world,
up on this
to be able to cast
examination.
everything aside and
I give
hide
up
in the depths
too.
of the mountains.
My life is more
not
important.
caring about worldly affairs.
After hearing the rules,
how rare is that?
a large number of angry
To put it
roars
bluntly,
sounded. Without extraordinary
Whatever.
perseverance and
Last
temperament,
but not least,
it's impossible.
the first person to reach
Yun
the stairway
sighed.
to heaven will be
Brother
rewarded
Nye
with
is
a peak
right.
divine technique,
Hua Yi nodded.
a peak divine artifact,
Listening to the two's
and
words,
100,000
Qin
soul
Fei
stones.
Yang and the other two
This
were
is
a
a
little
temporary
embarrassed.
decision made by the
Brother
leaders
Jiang,
and is also the
Just
greatest
now you seem to
encouragement
say
for
that
you.
you've been following Master
Now,
and living in
the
seclusion in the
examination
depths of the
begins.
mountains. After
Nye
Feng
Yun
Wanhai
suddenly
finished
said.
speaking,
Qin
he
Fei
turned
Yang
around
nodded.
and left. To be able
What?
to nurture such outstanding
divine
disciples
technique.
like you,
Peak
he
divine
must be a great
artifact.
figure.
Nye Yun
100,000 soul
smiled without
stones.
batting an eyelid.
There has
I
never
don't
been
know
such a
about
reward
that.
in history.
Qin Fei Yang
Are we
shook
really
his head.
going to give up?
Obviously.
I'm a
Nye
little
Yun
unwilling.
wanted to inquire
The
about
reward
something.
is very generous.
Nye Yun
Yes,
asked
but
curiously.
you have to be alive
Then
to
may
enjoy
I
it.
ask Brother Jiang what's
If
his
you're
name?
not afraid of death,
Master has
then
never
go.
mentioned his
I
name
won't
before.
participate anyway.
Moreover,
some people
Master
hesitated.
has always been very strict.
Some people turned around
We dare
and
not
left
ask
without
too much.
hesitation.
Qin
But there were
Fei
also
Yang
people
said,
who resolutely
a
rushed
strict
towards
master
the Sky
produces
Dragon's outstanding
outstanding
under the
disciples.
generous reward.
Nye Yun
For a
chuckled.
time,
Qin
the
Fei
plane
Yang
was in
smiled.
chaos.
What do you mean
Literature
by
Hall.
that?
It seems like we're the ones asking you questions. Why
Chapter
are you the ones asking
1971.
nonstop now? Qin Fei
Fire
Yang and
Lotus
the other
looked at
three
Nye
were
Yun
also
and
deeply
Hua Yi
shocked
with
at this moment.
dissatisfaction.
A pinnacle
Haha.
divine art.
Nye Yun and Hua
A
Yi
pinnacle
looked at each other
divine
and laughed,
artifact,
saying,
and
"It's our fault,
100,000
our
soul
fault.
stones.
Miss,
This
don't
was
be
really
angry.
a big deal. The
Perhaps
total number of
only
soul
Ninth
stones
Heaven
needed
Palace
to break
would be
through
willing
from
to
the
take it
pseudo-god
out.
realm to the
Hua
divine
Yi
lord
came
realm
back
to
to
his
not a
senses
small
and turned
amount.
to look at Qin
The
Fei
three
Yang,
of you,
saying,
let me
Brother
explain it to
Jiang,
you
should
like
we also
this.
give up?
Even if I,
Give
the
up?
son of the city
Qin
lord,
Fei Yang
went
was
bankrupt,
stunned.
I still
As
wouldn't
someone
be able
said
to gather
before,
so many
although
soul
the reward is
stones.
tempting,
Nye
we
Yun
need to be
looked at
alive
Qin
to
Fei
enjoy
Yang
it.
and the other two and
Hua Yi
said,
said, Is it that
Qin Fei Yang shook
exaggerated?
his head and smiled,
Qin Fei
saying,
Yang was
if we all
also give up.
It's not
Won't Feng Yuan
exaggerated
and
at
the
all.
others' efforts be in
You
vain?
guys calculate carefully.
Xueqi was stunned and asked
To break through
suspiciously,
from the initial stage
what do
of
you
the
mean?
pseudo-god realm to the initial
Xueqi
stage
still
of the
did
war
not
god
know
realm.
about Feng
You need
Yuan and
1,000
Feng
soul
Wanhai's
stones.
plan.
To break
Qin
through to the
Feiyang
initial
said with a
stage of the
smile,
war god realm,
they want to make a
you
move
need
on us in the
10,000 soul
assessment.
stones.
All the more
To break
reason
through
we
to the
can't
large
go.
success stage,
Xueqi said,
you need 100,000
with such a generous
soul stones.
reward.
Even
To
if I
break
know
through
it's
to
a
the
trap,
perfection
I
stage,
can't help it.
you need 1,000,000
Maybe
soul
this is one of
stones.
Feng Yuan's plans.
To break through to the perfection
Qin
stage,
Feiyang said,
you need 10,000,000
what you're
soul
saying
stones.
is that this reward
And
is
to
a
break
bait
through from the
targeted at
perfection
us.
stage to the
Qin
half-step divine
Rushwang
lord
raised
realm,
her eyebrows.
and then to the initial stage
Qin
divine
Feiyang
lord
said,
realm, Feng
you need
Yuan
a
is the
total of
hallmaster of the
100,000,000
resource
soul
hall,
stones.
so the reward is
Tell
definitely
me,
related to
who
him.
can take out such a large
I
amount
see.
of soul stones?
The three of them suddenly
Yun
understood.
said.
This
Jiang Haotian,
Qin Feiyang
you
and the
really
other two
came,
looked at each other.
but you'd better not
They actually
go.
needed more
It's
than
too
100 million
dangerous.
soul stones
Several
to break
young
through
men
from
and
the
women looked
pseudo-god
at
realm
Qin
to the
Feiyang
divine
and
Lord
advised,
realm when they passed
then
by
wouldn't
Qin
all of them
Feiyang and
add
the
up to
others.
more than 1 billion
Thank you
soul
for your
stones?
concern. Fire
Qin
Lotus
Feiyang
didn't
said
count
with a
as she was an
smile.
outsider
You
after
won't
all.
listen.
No one will sympathize with you when you die. The few of
Other
them
than
snorted
Fire Lotus,
coldly and
there was the
swaggered
mermaid
off.
princess.
Fire
Qin
Lotus
Feiyang,
looked at them and
Qin
said,
Rushuang,
Tan Tai Li,
your identity
Zhao Tai
doesn't
Lai,
seem to have been
Cui Li,
exposed.
Tang Hai,
Yes,
Willow Tree,
it hasn't been
Yu Huang,
exposed.
White-Eyed Wolf,
Qin Feiyang
Blood
replied.
Kirin, Thunder
Does
Leopard,
this mean that
Golden
the people
Leopard,
who saved
and Dan
Xueqi
Xueqi
are not Feng
a
Yuan
total
and the
of 9
others?
people and
Fire
5
Lotus
beasts.
said. In total,
Qin Feiyang
they
looked
would
at
need to
Qin
find at
Rushuang
least
and transmitted his voice.
5 billion
What do you
soul
think?
stones. There's no
1.5
need to think
billion
about
was
it.
simply impossible.
It must be Mu
Because
Tianyang
now,
and the others
even
who are
1
using
million
this kind
soul
of trick.
stones was an astronomical
Qin
number in their
Rushuang
eyes.
transmitted her voice.
Soul stones are limited.
They're really fast.
Even the Ninth
However,
Heaven Palace
this
and the
is
Treasure
only
Pavilion
interesting.
can't afford such
Otherwise,
consumption.
How boring
So,
would it be for me to be
cultivation
alone
mainly
in the
depends
ancient
on
realm?
one's own efforts.
Qin Feiyang smiled
As for
secretly.
soul stones,
I can
Feng
only
Yuan
say that it
alone is
depends
enough
on
of a
luck.
headache.
It's
What's
naturally
there
to be
best if
bored
there
about.
is?
Qin
If there
Rushuang
isn't,
rolled her
we
eyes.
can't force it.
Huai
glanced
Huai
at the three of
sighed.
them and frowned.
Qin Feiyang
Brother
smiled
Jiang,
bitterly.
are we still partners?
It seemed that using
Qin
soul
Feiyang
stones to
was taken
accumulate
aback.
everyone's
He
cultivation was a
nodded
bit
and said,
unrealistic.
Yes, why?
Rumble.
Since
Suddenly,
we are partners,
ear-splitting
shouldn't we be
noises
honest
came
with
from
each
the
other?
mountains on both
But look
sides.
at the two of you now, flirting with
Qin
each other
Feiyang
and
and
hiding
the others
everything
stopped
from
and
me.
turned their heads.
Is this how
Their
you treat
eyes
me?
full of surprise.
Huai said
But
with
deep in Ye Yan's
dissatisfaction.
eyes,
There was a
Shut
flash
up.
of light.
Who doesn't
Had
have
they
any
finally
privacy?
started to act? If you're
What's
honest
going
enough,
on with this
why
movement?
don't you just tell us
Could
your
it be
identity?
that there are beasts coming
Qin
from both
Rushuang
sides?
said.
Huai
There's
was
nothing wrong with
surprised.
my identity.
At this moment,
Huai
the ground
looked
on both
innocent.
sides was shaking.
It seemed that there was
Qin
a beast
Rushuang
tide
said,
coming from afar.
Do we look like idiots?
Fire Lotus glanced at
Huai
Nye Yun
smiled
and said,
embarrassedly.
Qin Dage,
Let's go.
Could it be that the beasts that
For the
Feng
divine
Yuan bought
technique
have moved
divine
out?
weapon
And Soul
It could
Stone,
be.
we have to get first
Qin
place no matter
Feiyang
what.
secretly said.
Qin Rushuang
Fire
looked
Lotus's
at the Sky
eyes
Dragon
sank and
Mountain
said
range
worriedly,
and said firmly,
If it's true, then how should
Sister
we deal with
Rushuang,
it?
one
You're
must
serious.
know. What
Fire
Feng
Lotus
Yuan bought were
smiled.
not ordinary
Of course.
beasts, but
Let's
monarch
go.
god-level beast
Qin
emperors.
Rushuang
waved her
These
hand and
beast
rushed
emperors
toward the
were not
Sky
only
Dragon
strong,
Mountain range,
but they also
Qin
ruled a
Feiyang
large
and
number of
Huai Yan
beasts.
looked at each other
If
and
they were
also
to join
chased
hands
after
to
him.
charge over,
Then even
these
Qin
guys
Feiyang
are
would
really
have to
not
activate
afraid
his
of
slaughter
death.
domain to deal with them.
Huai shook
Don't
his head
worry.
and followed helplessly.
I already have a
plan.
Looking at groups of people
Qin
rushing
Feiyang
into the Sky
secretly
Dragon
sneered.
Mountain range.
Crack.
Those who were
Boom.
afraid were
The
struggling with
rumbling
their sound
thoughts.
became more and more
Empyrean
deafening.
Palace.
The trembling
In front
ground
of the
became
stairway
more
to
and more
heaven.
violent.
Feng
The
Yuan and
mountains
Feng
in the
Dahai
distance
stood
began
side
to
by
collapse
side and looked
Billowing
at the void in
dust
front
and
of them.
smoke rose into
There
the
was
sky
an image
and
in the
spread in all
void.
directions.
It was the scene of
Finally,
everyone entering the
one
Sky
beast
Dragon
after
Mountain
another
range.
appeared in their line
At
of sight.
this moment,
Some were
the two
running
of
on
them
the
looked
ground.
like they were observing the
Some were
situation
flying
there.
in the air.
But in fact,
Without exception,
they were looking at Qin
each of them
Feiyang
was a
and the
giant
others.
beast
The
comparable to a
white-haired
mountain.
old man guarding
the
the
aura they
stairway to
emitted
heaven
was also
still sitting at the
terrifying.
side.
There were
But
even
just
more
like
than 100
before,
half-step
his eyes
monarch
were
god
closed and he
beasts.
did not care
At a
about
glance,
anything.
it was a black
In the
mask,
image,
covering
Qin
the sky and the
Feiyang
sun,
and the others
with a
quickly
monstrous
disappeared into the
ferocious
mountain.
aura. Feng
What's
Yuan
going
and
on?
Feng Dahai looked
Why are
away
there so
and looked
many
at each
beasts
other,
suddenly
a
running out?
murderous intent flashed in
Huai
their
was
eyes at the same
dumbfounded.
time.
Beast
Feng
tide.
Yuan waved his hand
Nye
and the
Yan's
image in the
face was
void
also deathly
disappeared.
pale.
Then,
Roar.
he looked at the white-haired
Humans,
old man and
be
looked
our
at
food
Feng
immediately.
Yuanhai. He smiled and said, Let's go back and report to everyone.
Okay.
Accompanied by a ferocious
Feng
roar,
Yuanhai nodded.
more than a dozen
The two
beasts
of them
took the
turned
lead,
into a stream
collapsing
of light
one
and
giant
disappeared
peak
at the
after
top of the
another,
stairway to
pouncing
heaven.
towards Qin
The
Feiyang's
storm has
group.
come and the
These
peace of the
dozen
ninth heaven
beasts were
palace
all
is over.
half-step monarch
What
god.
will happen in the
Nye
end?
Yan's body
Just
trembled
after
and he
Feng
roared.
Yuan and Feng
Brother
Dahai
Jiang,
disappeared,
Brother Hua, the
quickly
white-haired
run.
old man slowly
A
opened
cold
his
light
eyes and
flashed
looked in the
across
direction
Qin
of the Sky
Feiyang's
Dragon
eyes.
City. With a flick of
He
his
muttered to
sleeves,
himself with
he
anticipation.
swept up the four of them and
But
executed
soon
the
he
walk
closed his
character
eyes
art and
again.
teleportation.
Like an ordinary
Tearing
old
through the
man.
air like lightning. He did not
What
feel
fast
oppressed at all.
speed.
However, don't
Sky
think
Dragon
about
Mountain
escaping.
Range.
Under the lead
The
of those
border
half-step
area.
monarch dark god
The
beasts.
battle had already
the beast
begun.
tides on both sides
The battle
chased
between
after
humans
Qin
and
Fei Yong's
beasts
group
The
crazily.
mutual destruction
Ahead,
between humans
Mu
caused this mountain
Tianyang
to be
trio
quickly
stood in the
swallowed
void,
by blood.
looking at the beast
Greed,
tides on both
selfishness,
sides with a look
desire.
of surprise. All of
Why
these were
would a beast
displayed
tide
vividly
appear
at this
out of
moment.
nowhere? Too
Brother
terrifying.
Mu, long time no
This is
see.
simply Azura
Suddenly,
Qin
a
Fei
hearty
Yong's
laugh
group
came.
stood in the sky
Mu
above a mountain
Tianyang
ridge.
was taken aback.
Their pupils constricted
He
tightly
turned his
as
head
they
to look
scanned the
and saw
slaughter that was
Qin Fei
happening
Yong rushing
everywhere
over.
before them.
Not
As
only
well as
was
the
he
dismembered
smiling,
corpses and
but his
severed limbs
face
that
was
were
also
flying
full
all
of
over the sky.
enthusiasm. They had
What do you mean?
underestimated the cruelty
Mu
of this
Tianyang
assessment.
frowned.
It was
In
just a
few
few
blinks
blinks
of
and
an
it was
eye,
already so
Qin
tragic.
Fei Yong rushed in front
It
of
was
Mu
hard to
Tianyang
imagine
and
what they would
immediately
find
gave
later.
Mu Tianyang a bear hug. With tears in
Fire
his eyes,
Lotus
he
shook her
smiled
head
and
and
said,
sighed. Good
"This
brother,
kind of
we
battle,
finally
this
meet
kind
again.
of sacrifice, is
Good
it really
brother?
worth it?"
Mu Tianyang
Is it
was
worth it?
stunned.
Mu
This is a
Qin
difficult
was
topic to
Xueqi,
discuss.
Fire Lotus,
Qin Fei
Qin
Yong
Rushuang,
smiled
Mia
faintly.
Yun,
And
You still have the mood
looked
to
at the two with a
sympathize with them?
dumbfounded expression.
Quickly think about it.
Wait,
How should we go?
what are you doing?
Xueqi said. Who's your brother?
Qin Feiyong looked ahead and his eyes
came back to his
senses
and hurriedly
Let's
pushed
go a little
Qin Feiyong
further
away,
and try to avoid the
shouting
battle.
with disgust in his
Won't
eyes.
that take more time?
Brother,
Although we
Fire
haven't
Lotus
seen each
said.
other for a long time,
Yes.
you can't be so
However, if we
heartless
rush
and
over
not
like
recognize
this,
me as your
we will
brother.
definitely not
I
be
remember
able to
when we
avoid
were
a fierce
young.
battle.
We even
At that
wore
time,
underwear together.
we will waste even
If
more
there was
time.
a candy,
You had
let's
to share
go.
it with me.
Qin Feiyong waved his hand
said.
and rushed into the forest
Stop,
below,
stop.
heading southwest.
Mu Tianyong hurriedly
Qin
waved his
Rushwang and the
hand.
other two looked
Humans,
at each other and immediately
let's see where you can
chased.
run to. Soon.
Little ones,
The four of
kill
them rushed
for
to the
me.
front of a canyon.
Accompanied by a
After
series
observing
of roars,
for a while,
the beast
they did
tide
not
caught
sense
up with
any
a fierce
battle
glint in their
fluctuations
eyes.
in the canyon.
Not
The
good.
four of them went
As soon as
straight
he
into
saw
the
the
canyon.
beast tide,
Roar.
Mu Tianyong
But not
had a
long after
premonition
entering
of
the canyon,
uneasiness. A roar suddenly
Ancestor,
came from
we
a
seem
fork
to
in
have
the
been
front.
tricked.
Following
Mu
closely,
said with a frown
the
as she
earth
looked
shook
at the
and the
aggressive
mountains
beast
shook.
tide. A group of ferocious
Tricked.
beasts rushed
Mu
out from the
Tianyong
ground.
stared blankly
It was a
and
group of
immediately
mountain
understood.
beasts.
Qin
The smallest
Feiyong
of them was
deliberately
more than
got
10
close to
meters
him
in
and then
size.
used him to deal
The
with the
lowest
beast tide.
cultivation base was at the
Bastard,
war
you
god
win.
level.
Run.
And their numbers were as many as hundreds of them.
Mu Tianyong
With
glared at
ferocious
Qin
glints in
Feiyong
their eyes.
angrily.
They
Then
shouted
shouted
at
at
Mu
Mu
Qing
Qing
and
and
Xueqi,
Feiyong and
turned
the other
around
three.
and began to flee.
You're courting
Brother,
death.
wait for me.
Fire Lotus's
Qin
eyes
Feiyong
flashed
smiled
coldly.
and quickly caught up with
Don't
Mu
attack.
Tianyong with Fire
Qin
Lotus
Feiyong
and the other
grabbed
three.
Fire Lotus. Don't let any
Why?
of them go chase.
Fire Lotus was
Those
suspicious.
beasts roared
Qin
ferociously.
Feiyong said to himself,
Literature
if you attack,
museum. Won't your undead power be exposed?
That's true.
Fire Lotus nodded, but then said, Chapter
Wait,
1979.
no, if I don't want to
expose my undead
Fire
power,
Lotus glanced
then I can
at Mu
only watch you
Tianyong,
guys fight.
and then looked at
Won't
the beast
I
horde
become a
behind
burden
them.
then? She suddenly
What are you
smiled and
thinking?
said, I
How
finally
can we
understand
say that you're a burden?
So you followed
Don't
Mu
worry,
Tianyong
I'm
for
here.
this. Qin
Of
Feiyong
course.
laughed secretly.
She was transmitting
Just
her
as Qin
voice.
Feiyong was about
What
to
else
attack.
do you think?
Qin Rushwang took
This
a step
Mu
forward
Tianyong,
first.
divine
Saved was
power
Xueqi,
surged out
then
and
killed the
dozens
black
of sword
dragon.
shadows appeared
He has
instantly.
to do something.
Each sword
Qin
shadow was
Feiyong
hundreds of
secretly
feet
laughed.
long. As if
So many
condensed from
ideas.
ice.
Cold
Qin
currents
Rushwang
swept
looked
in
at
all
Qin
directions.
Feiyong with disdain.
The world seemed
but
to
her
have
eyes
entered
were
a
full
cold
of
winter
smiles.
in an instant.
However,
The cold air
feeling
was
the terrifying
bone-piercing.
power behind them,
Kill.
Mu
Qin
Tianyong and
Rushwang
Mu
roared.
Qing's faces sank.
Dozens of sword
Mu
shadows
Qing
tore
kept
through the sky
transmitting
and
his voice.
slashed towards the
Qin
pangolin
Feiyong
beasts in
were
all
despicable.
directions. Divine
Despicable?
power shook
As soon
all
as
directions.
I arrived at
Sky Dragon
Roar.
City, you started to scheme
Immediately.
against me.
Cries of
Who
agony
is more
could be heard.
despicable? The pangolin
Qin
beasts who
Feiyong
had just
secretly
become war
said,
gods instantly
"Don't
lost
be
their
complacent.
lives. Even
I
the
won't let
low-level
you
war god
succeed."
pangolin beasts
Mu
fell
Qing
into a
coldly
pool of
snorted,
blood, turned to
no
look at
longer
the beasts
able to
and
fight.
said, The air was
we
immediately
have nothing to
filled
do
with
with
a
this
pungent
Jiang
smell of
Haoyan.
blood.
If you want to
Human,
kill him,
you're
kill
courting
him.
death.
Don't chase
An angry
us.
roar could be heard.
Do you think we're
accompanied
blind?
by a loud
Just
bang.
now,
A pangolin
clearly
beast that
called
was
you good
hundreds
brothers
of
and
feet
hugged
long
that
roared
human
out
with
from the
tears
ground.
streaming down his face.
It
The
had the
beasts in the lead
cultivation of an
sneered.
advanced level war
This is
god.
his trick.
You're the one who's
He
courting
wants
death.
to drag us down
Sword
with him.
technique
Mu
fusion.
Qing said
Qin
angrily.
Rushwang's
But what
eyes
he
were
got
as
in
cold
return
as
was
ice.
the group of beasts
As her voice
sneers.
fell, the
Don't
dozens
say
of sword
anymore.
shadows merged
They
together.
won't believe it
Clang.
at all.
A
Even
sword
if they
shadow that
believe
was
it,
thousands of
they
feet
won't let
long
us go.
suddenly appeared.
Mu Tianyong
Divine
said
power
in a deep voice.
also instantly rose to
Qin
another level.
Feiyong, you bastard.
Following closely,
I'll fight with you.
The sword shadow
Mu
pierced
Qing
through the
was
sky
furious.
and slashed towards
He
the
secretly
pangolin
shouted
beast
and was ready
Roar.
to pounce on
A
Qin
cry of
Feiyong.
agony.
In
The
fact,
pangolin beast that had the
he had long
cultivation of an
noticed that
advanced
Qin
level war
Feiyong
god
had been
was
following
seriously
them.
injured by the
He had
sword
also
and blood
carefully
flowed out.
considered the reason why
This,
Qin Feiyong
Qin
had followed
Feiyong
them.
was shocked.
Originally,
Get
he had
lost.
thought that Qin
Qin
Feiyong was
Rushwang
looking for an
shouted.
opportunity to
The
seize the
pangolin
black
beast's
dragon's
eyes
divine
trembled.
soul.
With
But
a
who would have
hurried roar,
thought that he would have
it
such a
turned
plan?
around and drilled into the ground.
Qin
The other
Feiyong's face
pangolin
was full of
beasts also
disdain.
drilled into the ground as if
Stop.
they were fleeing
Mu
for their lives.
Tianyong also frowned
After a
and
while,
shouted.
not
Ancestor,
a single pangolin
Mu
beast could be
Qing
found
said
here.
angrily in her mind.
Let's continue
Don't
on
you
our
know
way.
Qin Feiyong's
Qin
methods?
Rushwang said.
Not to mention
Why do I
you.
feel that Sister
Even I don't
Rushwang
have the
seems to have
confidence.
suddenly changed
Mu
into a different
Tianyong
person?
secretly glared at Mu Qing
Fire
and transmitted
Lotus was
his voice.
suspicious.
Qin
It's
Feiyong,
not strange.
how did you provoke these ferocious
Because she's
beasts?
too eager to find her father.
I didn't provoke them.
And this requires
Qin
great
Feiyong
strength.
shook his head.
Therefore,
if you didn't
she's
provoke
determined
them,
to get the
would
reward
they
this
chase
time?
after you?
Naturally,
Mu Tianyang
she's full
said
of enthusiasm.
angrily.
Maybe she
Qin
thinks I'm
Feiyang
handsome.
said.
Qin
Who's her
Feiyang
father?
touched his chin and
Hua
said
Yi
with a
looked
smile.
suspiciously at Qin
To hell
Feiyang
with
and
it.
Qin Rushuang.
Mu Tianyang was so
Her father
angry
is
that
my
his nose was
ancestor.
crooked.
Qin Feiyang
smiled and
chased
looked
after
Mu
Qin
Tianyang
Rushuang
and
with
Mu
Fire
Qin.
Lotus.
He said in surprise.
Ancestor?
Your cultivation
Father.
has improved
The
too
difference in
quickly.
seniority is
Mu
too big,
Tianyang was
isn't
actually
it?
a perfect
Hua
war god
Yi's
now.
mouth twitched.
And Mu Qin
After
had
Qin
also
Feiyang
stepped
caught
into
up
the
with
initial
Qin
stage
Rushuang,
of
he
war
asked,
god. What
These
you used
two
just
seem
now
to
was
have
the
only
Ice
come to the
technique?
ancient world half a year
Yes.
earlier than him?
Qin Rushuang
And at
nodded.
that time,
I remember that
Tianyang's
last time at the
cultivation was
miracle.
only at the initial
ice
stage
sword
of war
technique was
god.
only a perfect battle technique, right?
Qin Feiyong
In
said
half
in
a year,
surprise.
he had broken through
Is that
two small
strange?
realms in a row.
Even you can upgrade a battle technique to a divine technique.
In the past half
let
a
alone
year,
me.
in order to increase my
Let me
strength
tell
and
you,
obtain
not
soul
only
stones,
have I upgraded the
I've
ice sword
slaughtered
technique
many
to a
wealthy
divine
families.
technique, but I've also
Tianyong
upgraded it to a
secretly
mid-tier
snorted.
divine technique.
Qin Feiyong
Qin
raised his
Rushuang
eyebrows
glanced
and
at
said in
Qin
disgust,
Feiyong and smiled
"You really
proudly.
haven't changed at all."
Qin
Change?
Feiyong was stunned.
Why should I change?
Qin Rushuang
This
said,
world has always
now
been
you
so
know,
cruel.
my comprehension
If
is
you
not
don't
worse
kill
than
me,
yours.
I'll kill you.
Qin Feiyong
Mu
smiled
Tianyong
helplessly and
sneered.
said,
Qin Feiyong glanced
you're my
at him,
ancestor's
rolled his
daughter,
eyes, and gave Mu
daughter.
Tianyong a bear hug affectionately.
There's something that
He
I'm
said
very
gratefully,
concerned about now.
"Good brother,
Qin
you're really
Rushuang
loyal."
pondered for a while
You're
and looked
actually
at helping
Qin
us delay
Feiyong.
them.
There was
Thank
a hint
you.
of disappointment
We'll leave
between
first.
her eyebrows.
His voice
What's
was
the
especially
matter?
loud. Qin
After
Feiyong
saying
was
that,
suspicious.
he let go of Mu
Qin Rushuang
Tianyong
was
and
about
led
to speak,
Fire Lotus
but
and
at
the
this
others
moment,
to use the
a
Xing
golden
formula
light blade
again.
suddenly fell
In
from
an
the top of the
instant,
mountain on the
they
left
left
and
Mu
charged toward
Tianyong
Qin
and the other
Feiyong and the other
behind.
three at lightning speed.
Bastard.
Literature
Mu
Museum
Qin
was so angry that she stomped her feet.
Qin Feiyong's words were obviously said deliberately for the
Chapter
beasts behind them to hear.
1972.
Someone's here.
How dare you
The four of
threaten
them
to
raised
delay
their
us?
heads and looked up.
Human,
A cold
you're
light
really
surging
courting
in their
death.
eyes. Those
Clang.
half-step divine
Qin
Lord
Rushuang
ferocious
attacked
beasts
again.
were immediately
Frost
enraged
sword
and charged
technique was
towards Mu
formed.
Tianyong crazily.
Dozens of sword
Although
shadows
Mu
rushed into the
Tianyong
sky
had a
and
heaven-defying
merged into
divine
one.
artifact
They
in hand.
slashed at the golden
His
light
speed was
blade
not
with
as
a
fast as
destructive
Qin
aura.
Feiyong.
No.
He was
Seeing
chased
this,
by those
Huai's
ferocious beasts
expression
very
changed
soon.
as he shouted at
Mu
Qin
Qin
Rushuang.
turned his head to stare at those
Rumble.
ferocious
But
beasts
it was
and roared
too
angrily.
late.
Accompanied by a
said that we have
deafening
nothing
sound.
to do with them.
The golden
Why
light
are you
blade
guys
shattered
so
the sword
relentless?
shadow as easily as crushing
In the
dry
face of
weeds.
danger, puff.
You don't even
Qin
acknowledge your
Rushuang
brother.
spat out a mouthful
You're
of blood
really
and
useless
staggered back.
human.
I
The
was
group
too
of ferocious
careless.
beasts had
She
looks
looked
of
at the golden
disdain.
light blade with a
This
bitter
temper of
smile on her
mine.
pale face.
Mu Qin
Stabbing
gnashed his
others
teeth
in the
and
dark
flew
is
into a
not
rage.
what a gentleman would
It was
do.
fine if they did not
Huai
believe
said
him,
angrily,
but they even mocked
with a
him
stomp,
instead. The ground
this
collapsed.
was intolerable.
He rushed into
A
the
loud
sky
and clear
his
voice
divine
suddenly
power
rang
roared
out
in
from
all
behind the
directions
beast
as he
horde.
threw a punch at the
Quickly
golden
finish
light
them
blade.
off.
Hearing this,
At
the
that
beast
moment,
tide immediately bared its
Huai
fangs
also
and
screamed
pounced
as he was
towards
hit
hit
by
by
the
them.
golden light
Mu
blade and
Tianyong
smashed
glanced
into the
at the
ground.
back of the beast tide.
So strong?
Killing intent
Fire
surging in
Lotus
his
was
eyes.
shocked.
Xueqi
Qin
frowned and
was
said,
only a beginner
"Young
war
Master
god
Mu,
after all.
you can't make
But
a move."
Huai,
Who was a
otherwise,
great success war
it'll
god,
benefit Zhang
was not a
Haotian.
match for the golden light blade.
Then you tell me what
How
I should do?
terrifying was the
Mu
cultivation of the
Tianyong said
person hiding
angrily.
in the dark. If one could
Qin
enter the
Feiyong
spatial
looked at
divine
Huai
object or be
meaningfully
able
and
to
said to
activate
Fire
the legendary
Lotus,
altar,
take them back.
then they could still avoid
Fire
these ferocious
Lotus
beasts.
nodded.
He
But the
grabbed
test's
Qin
rules did
Rushuang
not
with
allow
one
it.
hand and Huai with the
Xueqi
other.
fell silent.
Then, fear
He
towards
instantly
Qin Feiyong
retreated.
and Mu Tianyong
Let me see who
involuntarily
you
welling
are.
up in her heart.
Qin Feiyong looked
Firstly,
up at the peak
it
of
was
the
Mu
mountain and
Tianyong
said
scheming
coldly
against Qin
He
Feiyong.
then teleported and
And
dodged
now,
the attack
it
of
was
the golden
Qin
light
Feiyong
blade.
scheming against
Rumble.
Mu Tianyong again.
The golden light
These
blade
two
slammed
people's
into the
means
canyon.
were all too terrifying.
The entire canyon
A
collapsed
moment of
and dust
carelessness
filled
and
the
they
air.
would fall into
Qin
eternal
Feiyong
damnation.
stood in the middle of the
Mu
dust and
Tianyong
looked
roared.
around.
Retreat! A
Mu
black
Qin
shadow,
and
hidden in
Xueqi
the
shuddered
dust,
and immediately
silently
retreated
appeared behind
explosively.
Qin Feiyong. Its 5 fingers were like eagle claws as it went
You
straight
guys
for
found
Qin
the wrong
Feiyong's
person.
head. Sneaking
Mu
around won't do
Tianyong.
much. I'm not someone
Qin
that you mere
Feiyong's
ants
eyes
can
were
offend.
filled with murderous
Mu
intent as he
Tianyong
turned
swept his
around and
gaze over
slapped.
those ferocious
A
beasts
dazzling
pouncing
golden
over.
light appeared in the center
His
of his
eyes
palm.
suffused with a shocking
Boom.
light. The black
Accompanied
shadow was
by a
instantly
clanging
sent
sound.
flying.
The blood blade
His
appeared.
entire arm was
Mu
lacerated
Tianyong
and
grabbed
bleeding
the blood blade
profusely
and charged straight
Hee
into
hee.
the beast tide.
Big brother,
That
you're really
ostentatious
amazing.
posture,
That
a little
terrifying
girl's
aura
laughter rang
was
out.
simply unstoppable.
Following closely,
Even half-step
4
divine
figures
Lord
appeared around
ferocious
Qin
beasts could
Feiyong.
only be slaughtered in
Dust
front of the
billowed in
blood
the air,
blade,
making it
Xueqi
difficult
looked
to
at the
see
blood
their
blade in
faces.
horror and muttered,
Zhang
Mu
Haotian,
Qin,
just
let
what
us see
level
what
of
you're
divine
capable
weapon
of.
is that?
Another loud
Don't
and
worry
clear
about
voice
that.
exploded like a
You
thunderclap,
just need to know that with this
deafening
blood blade,
everyone's ears.
no one can threaten us.
There's more than one.
Mu Qing
The
said
gazes of
proudly.
Fire Lotus trio,
But just as he
who had
finished
retreated
speaking,
far away,
Qin
couldn't
Feiyong's
help
figure
but tremble.
involuntarily
Boom.
appeared in his mind.
Before he
The
could
arrogance
finish
on
his
his
words,
face
also
4
immediately
terrifying
dissipated,
divine powers
replaced by a
erupted
look
like
of displeasure
volcanoes in the dust
in
and
the
smoke.
distance.
On top of a mountain,
this divine and might.
Qin Feiyong and his
Perfect
group
war
stood
god.
side by side.
Fire Lotus and the other
Amazing.
two's expressions
Amazing.
suddenly changed.
Nie Yun and
Zhang
Xueqi looked at
Haotian
Mu
died.
Tianyang and were also dumbfounded.
They
Another
never thought
sinister
that the
laugh
northern
sounded.
region would have such a
4
terrifying
waves of godly
person.
power surged
Xueqi
out and rushed
asked,
towards Qin
Brother
Feiyong
Jiang,
from
do
all
you really
directions.
know him?
Die.
If I don't know
the
him,
corner of Qin
why would I
Feiyong's
use him to
mouth
deal with
raised.
those ferocious
He
beasts?
raised his arm and instantly
Qin
sent
Feiyong
out
said
4
with a faint
palms.
smile.
4 waves
He's
of golden
really
light
not
appeared
simple.
and flooded the
Nie
sky.
Yun shook his
Colliding
head.
with the 4
On the
waves of
surface,
godly
he was
power.
paying attention to Mu
What?
Tianyang.
How is
But
this
in
possible?
fact, he was
They
glancing
actually
at Qin
bounced
Feiyong's
back.
group of 4.
4 cries
But
of
I'm
disbelief
curious,
suddenly rang
why
out
would a
in the
beast
dust
tide
and smoke.
suddenly appear?
Ah,
Qin Feiyong frowned,
at this moment,
turned his head to look at
Qin
Nye
Feiyong
Yun
suddenly
and asked,
screamed,
"Brother
and the
Nye,
4
do you
waves of
know?"
golden light also
Me.
dissipated.
Nye Yun was taken
Immediately,
aback and said helplessly,
Qin Feiyong fell from
"How
the
would I
sky
know?"
and crashed onto the
Moreover,
ground with a bang.
it's normal for a
What
beast tide
happened?
to appear in this
The voices
heavenly
of the
dragon
4
mountain
people once
range.
again rang out.
After all,
Filled with
this
shock
is the base
that couldn't
camp
be
of the
dispelled.
ferocious beasts.
Brother Zhang. That's
What
true.
we scanned the area
Qin
covered in
Feiyong
dust
nodded
and smoke
and looked
with
at
an anxious
Tianyang
expression.
again.
Nye Yun secretly
Suddenly,
breathed a sigh of relief.
The wind howled in this
then
area,
glanced at Qin
and the dust
Feiyong's
and
group
smoke
of 4.
quickly dissipated.
Seeing that all 4 of them
Everything
were paying
inside was
attention
presented
to the
to
battlefield,
him.
a
Qin
cold light
Feiyong
flashed
at this
in his
moment
eyes, was lying on
Suddenly,
the ground with his back facing
he
the
took a
sky
step
and his
back
face
and raised
facing
his
the ground,
hands at lightning speed.
constantly twitching
Divine
as if he was
power
having a
gushed
cramp.
out from his palms
Looking
and
up
slapped
again,
towards Qin Feiyong
3
and
men
Hui's
and a woman
heads.
were standing in
He
the
thought
air.
that Qin
At this
Feiyong's
moment,
group of 4
they were lowering
unprepared.
their heads and looking
He
at
thought
Qin
that he would
Feiyong with a look
definitely
of surprise.
succeed.
But
Why
he
did
didn't
he
see that the
suddenly
moment
fall
he
down
stepped
without
back,
any reason?
the corner of Qin
Could it
Feiyong's
be that
mouth
the method he
immediately
used
raised.
before has some side
Following
effects?
that,
A man
he
in
rolled
black
up
said,
Fire
this
Lotus
person was skinny and had sunken eyes,
and disappeared from Nye Yun's
his long
sight in
hair
a flash.
draped over his face,
Nye
and his
Yun's
eyes
hands
were glowing
missed,
with a faint
and
green
his
light.
face suddenly stiffened.
His voice also revealed a
Surprised?
gloomy feeling.
A mocking
At
voice
first
came from
glance,
behind him.
He looked
Nye
like a
Yun's
malicious
heart trembled,
spirit,
and he quickly
looking
turned
at his
around,
right arm,
only to see
his
Qin
skin and
Feiyong's
flesh
group
were
of 4
lacerated
standing
and
opposite
fresh
him,
blood flowed
their
out.
eyes full of ridicule.
Obviously,
Only
he
Huai
was the black
shadow
shadow
who had launched a sneak attack on Qin Feiyong but was sent flying by Qin
because
Feiyong.
he still didn't know
the
that
little
Nye
girl
Yun
glanced
was
at
also
Qin
a pawn
Feiyong,
bribed by
then
Feng
looked at the
Yuan.
man in black and
Nye
giggled.
Yun stared at
"I
Qin
guess your
Feiyong
judgment is
and
right,"
said in a deep voice,
"It can reflect our
when
godly
did you find
power.
out? It's
Qin
normal for this
Feiyong
method
smiled
to
and
have
said,
side effects.
"When I first saw
This
you,
person was a little
impossible.
strange.
I didn't
She was
reveal
clearly a
any
perfect
flaws
war
at all.
god,
But
Nye
she looked
Yun
like an
said,
8 or 9-year-old
didn't
little girl.
reveal any flaws.
Her height was only
Qin
about
Feiyong
1 meter.
smiled and said,
Her words and
"That's
actions
just what
were
you
also
think is
like a
infallible."
child.
Just as
Nye
the little
Yun's
girl
heart
finished
trembled.
speaking, Qin
Remember when I
Feiyong's body
killed
moved.
Cripple and the others?
He seemed to have
At
used
that
a lot of
time,
effort to turn
One-Eyed
over,
Man and the fierce
revealing
ghost
a
Sea of
pale
Qi were
face.
destroyed by me.
His head was
If
also
it was
covered
anyone
in
else,
dust,
then
they
he
would
looked
definitely
very
kill them
miserable.
first.
Looking
But the
at
person
Qin
you killed
Feiyong's
first was the
current
girl.
appearance, the little
Why
girl
is
giggled.
that?
It
Because
seems
you
that the
shot
side
that
effects
arrow,
are quite
not
serious.
really to kill the girl,
Who are
but
you?
to kill me.
Qin
At the
Feiyong's
same
face
time,
was gloomy
it was
as he
also
looked
to
at the
create
4
an
people,
opportunity for the
other
3
than
of
the
them
little
to
girl
escape.
and the man in black.
Am I
There was
right?
also a one-eyed
Qin
man and a
Feiyong
cripple.
smiled and said,
The one-eyed man
"This
wore
matter
a black
must be
eye
said
patch
that
on
he
his
discovered
left
it
eye.
himself.
He was more than 2
Otherwise, it would
meters tall
implicate
and his
Gongzi
body was
Feng.
also very burly,
Because Gongzi
like a
Feng
small
was not an
giant.
idiot. His
If he
valiant
said
aura
now that
was a
he
little
knew Nye Yun's
frightening.
purpose, Gongzi Feng would definitely think
As
that
for the
someone had
cripple,
tipped him off.
he held a golden
And with
walking
Gongzi
stick.
Feng's ability
He
and
was about
connections,
1.
it would be easy
7
to find
meters
out
tall
who had
and was
tipped him
neither
off.
fat nor thin.
After all,
However,
not many people
his
knew
face
about
was
this
pale
plan.
as if he was
Nye
terminally
Yun was
ill.
extremely
A little
shocked when he
girl,
heard
a
Qin
guy like a
Feiyong's
malicious
words.
spirit,
And a
Later,
one-eyed man
after
and
seeing
a
my
cripple.
strength,
You felt
why
it
are
was
these
too
people so
dangerous to confront
strange?
me directly.
Qin
So you
Rushuang
thought of a
frowned.
plan. You
It
traveled
doesn't
with
matter
us,
who we
approached
are.
us,
The
and
little
slowly
girl
looked for an
giggled.
opportunity.
What's important
And
is
along
that
the
you
way,
will all die.
you worked hard to
The
open
man
the
in
way in
black
front,
also laughed
so that we could
sinisterly.
completely trust
Qin
you.
Feiyong
But
said
you
in a
didn't
deep
know that
voice,
what you thought was
"At least
flawless
let
was
us die
actually full
knowing."
of loopholes.
Okay.
Because
I'll
on the
let
way,
you die
I
knowing.
noticed several
The one-eyed
times that you
man
wanted to
opened his
sneak
mouth
attack
and
us
his
from
voice was
behind.
deafening.
But every time,
Listen carefully.
I was able to easily
Cough, cough.
resolve it. This one-eyed
And
man
those
is called
seemingly
Hong Ping.
inadvertent actions
The little
were
girl
also
is called
deliberately
Chao
shown by
Zhiyun.
me.
The malicious
Because you
spirit
still
is
have
called
value,
Xueqi.
we
We still need you to open the
As
way
for
for
me,
us,
the
so I don't
terminally
want
ill
to get rid of
person,
you so
cough,
early.
cough.
I'm just
Let's
an
put
unknown
it this
pawn
way.
called Qi Hong.
If you hadn't made
the
a move
cripple
just
stared
now,
at Qin Feiyong
I would
and
still
said while
pretend that I
coughing,
didn't know
really
and let
like
you
a
do
sick
whatever you
person.
want.
Hong
Qin
Ping,
Feiyong
Chao
smiled
Zhiyun,
again.
Zhugu, Qi Hong. Qin Feiyong was stunned. Cough, cough. Looking at your expression, you seem to know
Chapter
us.
1980.
The cripple looked at
Nye
Qin
Yun
Feiyong
looked
suspiciously.
at Qin Feiyong in a daze.
Qin Feiyong shook his head
Initially,
and smiled,
he thought
saying,
that Qin Feiyong
"I've
was
heard
a
of your
simple-minded
names."
person when he
We're
suggested that they
actually
travel
so
together,
famous.
and Qin Feiyong
the cripple
agreed
looked
without
at the
hesitation.
malicious spirit and the
However,
other two. The
He did not
malicious
expect
spirit
that
and
it
the
was
other
all
two
an
were
act.
also quite
Instead,
surprised.
he was the one who was
One-eyed
fooled.
dragon lowered his head and
Ha ha.
stared at Qin
Amazing,
Feiyong.
amazing.
Quite a few people know
I
of our
truly
nicknames,
did not expect you to be
but
such
not
a
many
difficult
people
person to
know of
deal
our
with.
real names.
All of a sudden,
Where did you learn of
Nye
it?
Yun laughed loudly.
As you said,
His
is this
expression was
important?
calm,
Qin
and there was no
Feiyong
trace
slowly
of fear
got up
or
and
dread.
looked at the four of them.
Thank you for the
A trace of a
compliment.
smile crept into his eyes.
However, I'm
and
puzzled.
the paleness on his
I
face
have
was
no
also
grievances
dissipating,
with you in the past.
and soon became
Why are
incomparably
you plotting
rosy.
against me? Qin
The
Feiyong
one-eyed
was
man
suspicious.
and the other three
By
frowned.
asking this question,
Qin Feiyong
Feng
said,
Yuan could
"You're
completely
neatly
dispel
dispel
the idea
girl,
of someone
the malicious
leaking
spirit,
information
the
to
one-eyed
him.
man and the
I
cripple.
can't stand how
You're so
arrogant and
smart."
despotic you were in
The
the
little
treasure
girl
pavilion.
giggled.
Is
Qin
that reason
Feiyong
enough?
laughed involuntarily
Nye Yun
and said with a smile,
"It actually matches
"Yes,
your image very
Qin
well."
Feiyong nodded and
You
smiled.
flatter me.
The
Now,
malicious
do you want me to
spirit
do
laughed.
it, or do you want to end
Qin
your own
Feiyong
life?
glanced at the four of
Since
them,
Nye
the
Yun
mockery
did not
in his
want to
eyes
tell the truth,
undisguised, and said,
there was no need to
"Aren't you
continue
curious
asking.
why I suddenly
End
became
my
so
own
relaxed?"
life?
The
Nye
four of
Yun
them
was
looked
stunned
at each
for a
other with
moment
a
before
trace of
bursting into
suspicion on their
laughter again.
faces. Jiang
If I
Haotian,
didn't pretend to
you
be
can't
injured,
possibly think
would
that
you
I'm
be
as
standing
easy to
here
deal
chatting
with
with me?
cripple and the others,
Would you tell
right?
me your identities?
Continue. If you
Qin
really think
Feiyong
that my
crossed his
divine
arms
technique
and
has any
smiled.
side effects,
Clang.
then I can
Nie
only
Yun
say that
waved
you're
his
too
hand and the
naive.
golden bow appeared.
Qin Feiyong
Divine
laughed and
light
said,
shone
in all directions as he
pretending
looked
to
at
be
Qin
injured?
Feiyong arrogantly.
The four
of them were startled.
Do you know what grade
The
this
malicious
is?
spirit licked
Just
his lips
tell me
and grinned.
and see if you can
The
scare
three
me.
of you, it seems that
Qin
we've been played
Feiyong
like
smiled.
monkeys.
You're indeed of a
Unforgivable.
newborn calf
The
that isn't
one-eyed
afraid
man
of
roared.
tigers. An oppressive
Listen
and
up.
valiant
This
aura
bow
rushed
is
towards
called
the
Qin
sun
Feiyong
extinguishing
like a
divine
tide.
bow. Big
It's
brother,
a pinnacle
are you
grade divine
deliberately
weapon.
provoking us?
Nie
Yun
Yun
said
girl
proudly.
giggled.
Pinnacle grade divine weapon?
Then congratulations.
Qin Feiyong was stunned.
You've successfully
He turned to
provoked
look
us.
at Fire Lotus and
The
Qin
cripple
Rushwang and
grinned.
asked suspiciously,
Boom.
Is a pinnacle grade divine weapon strong?
Can it
aura
compare
of
to
the
Mu
Mu
Tianyang's
Tianyang's blood
blood blade?
blade?
They were
When
all
Fire
perfect
Lotus
war
and Qin
gods.
Rushwang heard that,
Huai said
they
in shock.
immediately burst
Four
into
perfect
laughter.
war gods.
This guy
Sister
really
Fire
had a
Lotus,
talent for playing
quickly
dumb.
tell your brother to run for his
Fortunately,
life.
they knew Qin
Run
Feiyong.
for your life.
Otherwise,
Fire Lotus's
they would have
red
been
lips
fooled
under
by
the
Qin
mask slightly
Feiyong's
curled
current
up with a
appearance.
hint of ridicule.
Cough, cough. If you
Brother,
anger us,
this pinnacle
you'll have
grade
to pay with
divine
your
weapon
life.
is beyond
Big
supreme
brother,
grade.
are you ready?
It's very strong.
The
The
little
little girl giggled and
Huai
looked
Yan
at Qin
coughed
Feiyong
dryly
and began
Don't
to explain
disappoint me.
seriously. Qin
I see.
Feiyong laughed.
Qin
Big
Feiyong
brother
nodded
is
in
so
realization
stubborn.
and turned
You're
to look at the
obviously
Sun
scared
Destroyer
to death,
divine bow
but
in
you
shock.
still have to pretend to be
Seeing
calm.
Qin
Aren't
Feiyong's
you tired?
ignorance, Nie Yun
The
was
little
really
girl
pleased,
giggled.
and a
However,
blood-red divine
Qin
power
Feiyong
suddenly
bared
out.
his teeth and
At
laughed
the same time,
mischievously.
the
I
cripple's
want
walking
this
stick
divine
shook,
bow.
and a golden
What?
light blade
Nie
swept out.
Yun
Was with him.
Qin Feiyong
He
looked
wanted
at
the
cripple
sun
and said,
extinguishing divine
so the
bow?
person who ambushed
Was he
us before
dreaming?
was you.
Don't make it
Whoosh.
sound so bad.
However, when he came
Cough,
back, he was
Besides,
he
ambushing
he
is
was
also
that.
one of my methods. Immediately,
The cripple
his
grinned.
eyelids twitched.
Today is the
divine
day of your
power
death.
rolled out.
One-eyed
While
dragon
reviving the
roared.
Sun Destroyer
Hee
bow,
hee.
he teleported
Soon
away.
you will become a real evil spirit. The evil spirit also laughed sinisterly.
Because he knew that
the four
Qin
people's
Feiyong
divine
must be
power
behind him
covered the
now.
sky and earth.
Do you know
and
how
a
the
destructive
cripple
aura
died?
enveloped all directions.
Now, I'll let
The
you
void and the
experience
earth
it.
within a radius
But
of
at
tens
the
of
same
thousands
time,
of miles were
an
collapsing and sinking.
awe-inspiring voice rang
Countless
out.
fierce beasts were
Qin
affected.
Feiyong used the walk
The other
formula and
examinees
caught up with
also
Nie
fled
Yun
when they heard the
He
news.
raised his arm and his
Accept
index
the
finger
judgment
landed
of
on
the
the back
death
of Nie
god.
Yun's head.
One-eyed
Dragon
immediately
roared.
after.
Four divine
Nie
powers
Yun
like
felt
a
a
terrifying
terrifying
murderous
poured
aura
down
from
from
the
the
sky
sky
and
and blasted
blasted
towards
towards
Qin Feiyong.
Immediately. Not good,
Deep
really
in his
not
heart,
good.
a deep fear
He was
emerged.
burning with
anxiety.
The next
can act
moment,
better than us.
His head
I really want to
exploded
kill
in the
him.
void. Qin
His
Rushwang
divine
glanced
soul
at
was
Huai
also
and
annihilated
secretly
on the
snorted.
spot. It
I
appeared
want to
again.
too. Fire
It's a
Lotus
complete
transmitted
instant
her
kill.
voice. Ninth
If we
Heaven
didn't go to
Palace.
Black Dragon Lake
the
to
major
investigate,
figures in the hall
we
were
would have
in
been
an uproar
deceived
by
again.
this person. Everyone's
Think
face
about
was
it.
full of
How
disbelief.
could someone who dared to
And
rob
this
the
time,
Black Dragon's
everyone
treasure
caught
be
the
such a
murderous
coward?
aura. At the
They
same
were all
time,
thinking,
in
what
the Ninth
exactly
Heaven
was this
Palace,
murderous aura?
in an ancient
And
hall,
Feng Yuan's face
inside
was
the hall,
undoubtedly
it
even
was 100
uglier.
meters high.
First,
The
dozens
cripple
of
was
people
killed in an
sat on the
instant.
chairs in order.
Then those fierce
looking
beasts
at
were
the
cleverly
void
avoided
avoided
by
by
this
this
hall.
child. And now
there were
even Nie Yun
pictures.
died in the hands
One
of
of the
this child.
pictures showed Qin
As for the other
Feiyong's
people,
current
they
situation.
were now in the Sky Dragon
Feng
Mountain
Yuan and
range and
Feng
couldn't even
Wanhai
protect
were also
themselves,
present.
let alone
The
kill
others
this
were all
child.
paying attention
In
to all
other
the
pictures,
words.
all
In
the
other
arrangements
words,
he
they
made
were paying
in
attention
vain.
to all the
Why
examinees.
was this person so
But
difficult
Feng
to deal
Yuan
with?
and Feng Wanhai had been
Fortunately,
paying
there
attention
was
to the
another
picture where
arrangement.
Qin Feiyong
Otherwise,
was.
he couldn't do
And in the
anything
depths
to
of
this
their
child.
eyes,
There was
you
a
can be
trace of a
proud
sneer.
first.
The
Literature
crime of slandering
Museum.
Ninth Heaven Palace is already irrefutable.
When you reach Ninth Heaven Palace,
Chapter
you will know that you will
1973.
never escape
The
from my
canyon
palm.
had been leveled
Feng
to the
Yuan
ground.
secretly
The
sneered.
shattered ground trembled
At the peak of the
violently
mountain,
under the pressure of the
Huai
four divine
looked at
powers.
Nie Yun's corpse.
Cracks of
The
the
corner
abyss
of his
spread in
mouth
all
twitching
directions
constantly.
like a spider web.
Even the son of
How
the Star River
terrifying was
City
it when
was
the four
directly
perfect
killed
stage
without
gods
any
of war
hesitation.
joined forces?
This guy was
However,
really crazy.
Qin Feiyong
But
was as
Qin
calm as
Feiyong's
Mount Tai.
expression didn't
He
change at
wasn't
all.
nervous at
As
all.
if he had done an
Just as the
extremely
four
ordinary
divine powers
thing.
fell,
Qin
Qin
Rushwang
Feiyong
and Fire
slowly
Lotus
raised
were
his
the
arm
same.
and gently patted
Qin
the air.
Feiyong waved his
Whoosh.
hand and
A
grabbed the
golden
Sun
divine
Destroyer
light
divine
appeared
bow.
and attacked the
Qin
divine powers
Rushuang
of the
also
four.
stepped forward
With
and
a
took the
loud bang,
Qian ring
the
from
divine
Yeun's
powers
hand.
of the four couldn't
It is
resist at
indeed a
all.
peak-grade
The
divine
divine
weapon.
powers turned in the
You have
air
really
and
given me a
engulfed the
good
four
treasure.
of them. After dripping blood on
Painful
it,
screams
Qin Fei Yang
resounded through
observed
the
the Sun
sky.
Destroyer
When
divine
the
bow
four
for
of
a
them
while,
escaped
and
from
a
the
bright
divine
smile
powers,
appeared on his face.
their bodies were already
He
covered in
hurriedly
blood.
ran in front of
How
Qin
is
Fei
this
Yang and
possible?
stared at the Sun
He can
Destroyer
still
divine
repel our
bow.
attacks when we
He
join
said,
forces?
Brother Jiang,
The four of them
everyone has
looked
a
at
share.
Qin Fei Yang in shock.
Do it yourself.
Their
And you will
arrogance
have
from
ample
before
food
had
and
completely
clothing.
disappeared.
Qin Fei Yang
After
laughed.
being so arrogant
Me.
for so long,
Look at my
I
strength.
thought you were very
How
powerful.
can I defeat a perfect
It turns
realm
out
of
that
war?
this is all you've got.
Huai said
Qin
with a
Fei
crying
Yang said
face.
disappointedly.
You really
The
know
four
how
of
to
them were
pretend.
furious.
Qin Fei
Divine
Yang muttered to
powers
himself
surged and the
and
aura
didn't
of
bother to
divine
pay
art
attention to
into
him.
Even
He
if you
looked
have
at
an
Qin
incredible
Rushuang and
divine
asked,
art,
How
It's
is
useless
it?
against me.
Not bad, not
Qin
bad.
Feiyong's eyes were filled
He has
with
at least
murderous
60,000
intent.
soul
He
stones
jumped
in his
into the air and
Jiankun
charged
ring.
at the four of them.
And I estimate that there are
You've got
70 to
guts.
80 million divine
Let me
gems.
fight you.
The one-eyed dragon took a step forward and waved his large fan-like
Qin
hand,
Rushwang said happily.
slapping towards Qin
Fire
Feiyong.
Lotus said in surprise.
We shouldn't continue
Doesn't that mean
fighting.
we have become rich
because
overnight?
this kind of battle is
There is nothing
disadvantageous
wrong
to
with
Qin
that.
Dage.
Qin Rushwang laughed
Fire
and threw
Lotus
the
said to
Jiankun
herself
ring
with a
to
worried
Qin
face.
Feiyong.
She
I
said
agree.
meaningfully.
Fire
Aren't there a
Lotus
few
nodded.
more?
The
We
four of
can't
them
let
were
them
stronger
go so
than Qin
easily.
Feiyong.
If
Qin
they really
Feiyong was
fought,
stunned.
it was
He
inevitable
raised his
that they
head
would
and
be
looked
injured.
at Qin Rushwang.
Once they were injured,
He smiled and
they
said,
would definitely
Indeed,
bleed.
we can't let
This
them go.
way.
The purple gold
Xueqi
dragon
glanced
blood
at the
would
three
be
of them and
exposed.
snorted with
They
dissatisfaction.
also knew that Qin
Brother
Feiyong
Jiang,
didn't want to
you're so
expose the
dishonest.
six-word divine art
Qin
too
Feiyong
early. couldn't help
However,
but laugh.
Qin
He put the
Feiyong didn't seem to
Jiankun
have
ring
any
into
other
his
means
chest
other
pocket.
than the
But
six-word
in
divine
fact,
art to be
he had sent it
unharmed
to the
against the
ancient
four of them.
castle.
Therefore,
He then turned
it
around
was
and looked at
reasonable to
Mu
avoid
Tianyang
the battle.
again.
Boom.
Qin Rushwang
The
said,
one-eyed dragon's
I think
strength
those people
was
have been
terrifying.
following us. Even with
Now,
Qin
they
Feiyong's
should be
physical
behind the
body,
beast tide.
he felt a fatal threat.
I know.
But
Qin
he did
Feiyong
not
nodded
retreat
and looked away from
because
Mu
Fire
Tianyang
Lotus
to
and
Mu
Qin Rushwang's worries were also
Why are
his
you
worries.
looking at them? This battle had to
Qin
be ended
Rushwang
quickly.
was suspicious.
The one-eyed man's
Don't you
fist
think
was
this is
about
a good
to land on his
opportunity?
face. Qin
Suddenly,
Feiyong whispered.
Qin
What
Feiyong disappeared
opportunity?
without a trace.
Qin Rushwang was
Concealment
puzzled.
technique.
Now that
Mu
immediately
Tianyang is
after,
surrounded by the beast
the one-eyed man
he
screamed
can't
as a
take care
bloody
of Mu
hole
Qin.
appeared on his lower
And because
abdomen.
of the rules of the
Blood
assessment,
was gushing out
Mu
like a
Qin
fountain.
can't enter the space
What
divine item
happened?
either.
Cripple and the other two
So now is
scanned
the
the
best
void
time
in
to deal with
bewilderment.
him.
In the
Qin
next
Feiyong's
instant,
eyes
the
flashed
malicious
coldly.
ghost let out a
He
miserable
activated
howl
the
as a bloody
concealment
hole
technique,
appeared in
and the
its
four
lower
of them
abdomen.
disappeared immediately.
What the hell is going
At the
on?
same time, Mu Qing and Xueqi stood
Could it
in the
be a
void,
spatial divine
watching
object?
Mu Tianyang. Jiang
However,
Haotian,
if one looked
this
closely,
is against the rules.
one would find that there was a
Cripple shouted
strange
in
light
anger.
in Mu Qing's eyes.
No.
It
Seeing
can't
that
be a
Qin
spatial
Feiyong and the
divine
others were
item.
approaching,
Because
Mu
if it's a
Qing lifted
spatial
the corner
divine
of her mouth.
object, it's
She grabbed
impossible for him to
Xueqi
be
and
so
teleported
fast.
toward Mu Tianyang.
I think he must have mastered some kind of divine
Qin
art that
Feiyong
can
was
make him
stunned.
invisible.
Did he
The
find
little
us?
girl
said in a low
Fire
voice.
Lotus was surprised.
As soon as
she finished
Jiang
speaking,
Haotian,
she felt
is
an
this interesting?
unprecedented sense of
Mu
danger
Qing
behind
flew
her.
for a distance
Without
and stopped
thinking,
in the void.
She turned her head
around
and waved
and
her
looked at
small
Qin
fist as she
Feiyong and
punched the
sneered.
void. The
He
divine
really found
aura of a
us?
perfect stage war
Xueqi
god
was
spread in all
surprised.
directions.
Sure enough,
Under the
we
pressure of
can't
the divine
underestimate
aura,
him.
the concealment
Qin Feiyong
technique
shook his head
immediately
and sighed.
dissipated.
In this
Qin
situation,
Feiyong
appeared
Mu
in the
Qing
void.
must have been using the
It's
all-seeing
indeed a
eye to
divine
spy
art
on his
that can make
whereabouts.
him invisible.
The all-seeing
The
eye
one-eyed
was one of
man
the
and the
top 10
malicious
fighting
ghost's
souls.
pupils contracted.
The concealment
But
technique
then their
couldn't
eyes
escape
were filled
his
with
detection.
greed.
A
Forget
divine
it.
art that can make
Qin
him invisible
Feiyong
was simply the
decisively
best
gave
way
up
to
the idea
assassinate.
of killing Mu Qing.
Cripple, little girl. He led
You
the
must
three of
kill
them
him
around
and
the
get
beast
that
tide
divine
and looked
art.
for Zhang Yunfei
The
and
one-eyed
the
man
others.
shouted as he
Mu
took out two
Tianyang
spirit
was in a
seed pills.
frenzy.
He swallowed
He was
one and
bathed
threw
in the
the
blood
other
of the
to the
beast,
malicious
and the
ghost.
corpses were piled up
Of
like
course.
a mountain.
Cripple
Those
grinned
war
and
god-level
said,
vicious
with a
beasts didn't
teleport,
dare to approach.
he landed in front of
Even
Qin
the
Feiyong
half-step
and
divine
swept the
lord
crutch in his
vicious
hand.
beasts were cowering
Qin
in fear.
Feiyong did not dare to take
Useless
it head
trash.
on.
Because
Get
the crutch
lost.
was a divine
I'll
art.
deal with him myself.
But because it had not recovered,
With a few deafening
he could not
roars of
determine
anger.
the grade of the crutch.
For ferocious beasts
If it was a
rushed out from
high-grade
the back of
divine
the
art
beast
or a
tide,
perfect divine art,
they were a black panther,
he would
a golden
definitely be
eagle,
injured
a
if he
black
took it
wolf,
head-on, and a spotted
These
python.
people are going to be serious. Fire Lotus was worried.
The
If
largest
Qin
one was
Feiyong
the
attacked
spotted
without
python,
holding back,
which was a few
four
hundred
perfect
meters
stage
long.
war gods would be as
When the
easy
four
as
divine
slaughtering
beasts
chickens
appeared,
and lambs.
the heavens
But
and
now,
earth trembled.
Qin Feiyong
The
had too
beasts
many
roared in all
concerns.
directions. He
The
did not
beast
even
tide
use
that surrounded
one-tenth
Mu
of his strength.
Tianyang also
Just as
retreated in
Cripple
fear.
attacked, a
Ancestor,
blood-red sharp blade
their aura
appeared
has
in front of the
surpassed
little
that of a
girl.
half-step Sir
With a
God.
monstrous sharpness,
Be careful.
it charged
Mu
towards Qin
Qing's pupils
Feiyong.
contracted
Qin
and she
hurriedly
hurriedly
sent a voice
contraction.
The
Mu
blood-red
Tianyang
sharp
took a
blade
deep
was a
breath
few
and
hundred
divine
feet
power
long.
surged out.
It was as if
The
it was
blood blade in
condensed
his
from
hand
blood
started
and had
to
a
emit
murderous
streaks
aura.
of bloody light.
He could tell at a glance
Obviously,
that it was evolved
he was
from
going
a
to
perfect
revive
divine
the blood
art.
blade.
This group
This
of
scene
people
was also
indeed
seen by
not
Qin
simple.
Feiyong and the others.
We will return the
Their
words you said
expressions
just
were
now.
also quite quite shocked.
Even if you have a divine
Fire
art that
Lotus
defies the
snorted and
natural
said,
order,
"For
it is useless in front of us." Feng
Cripple
Yuan
laughed.
really thinks highly
The
of
golden
us.
crutch in the air made a
The
deafening
aura of
sound
these
of
four
wind and
beasts
thunder.
seems to be comparable
Qin
to
Fei
Guiyang
Yang's.
retreated while
They
glancing
should
at
be
the
at
two.
least small success,
Suddenly,
Sir God level.
murderous
Even
intent
Mu
flashed in his
Tianyang
would be
eyes.
at a disadvantage.
Using the walk formula and
Of
teleporting,
course, if the blood blade
he
fully
disappeared
revives,
from the sight of
it would
Cripple
be a
and
different
Fire
story.
Lotus. Qin
This
Fei Yang laughed.
not only
Fully
Cripple and Fire
reviving?
Lotus, but even
He shouldn't
Cyclops
be
and
able to
Fire
do it
Lotus
yet,
were stunned.
right?
How
After
did he
all,
disappear
the
again?
divine
Power needed for
Wait.
such a heaven-defying
Cyclops
divine
suddenly
artifact
opened
is
his eyes
incomparable
wide
to
in
other
anger.
divine artifacts.
He looked behind
Unless
Cripple
the
and
blood
shouted,
blade revives
"Cripple,
itself.
be careful."
Qin Rushuang thought. Cripple was stunned.
I'm
not sure about that. Qin Fei Yang shook his head.
He could react,
Whether it was
a
Chang
finger
Shui
poked
the
or
back
the
of his
ancient
head,
castle,
Immediately
truly
after,
revived them.
An aura
The
of
same
death
went for the
emerged from
ancestor demon
depths of Cripple's
Snowflake
heart.
and Mu
The
Tianyang's
price to
blood
pay
blade.
for angering me
Every
is
time
not
these
small.
heaven-defying divine
Following the
artifacts
cold
displayed their
voice,
full power,
Cripple could only
they would
feel a
revive
terrifying
themselves,
murderous aura
perhaps,
bursting out from it.
with the cultivation
Then,
of the god of
his
war.
head suddenly
It was
exploded in
impossible
the
to
air
fully
like a
revive
watermelon.
these divine artifacts.
Flesh and blood flew
and
everywhere.
the standard for full
This-
revival was the power of
This
the
scene
laws.
left the one-eyed man
Don't
and the
worry
malicious
about
spirit
him.
dumbfounded.
Hurry up and
The
find
girl
those
also
four
froze
people.
in the air.
Qin
Her little
Rushuang
face
came back
full of
to her senses
disbelief.
and urged
In an
Qin Fei
instant,
Yang. Qin
he
Fei
actually
Yang nodded
killed
and
Cripple?
hid in the void as he started a
Amazing.
carpet search.
Fire Lotus
Not
looked at
long
Qin
later,
Fei Yang with
they
eyes full of
discovered
admiration.
4 figures on top of a
However,
mountain peak.
Qin Fei Yang
3
did
men
not
and
show
a girl.
off or feel proud.
Who else could it be
After
but
killing
Li Gui
Cripple,
and the others?
he grabbed the crutch and took
They
another
are
step
indeed
forward,
tailing us,
avoiding the
Qin
blood-red
Rushuang
blade.
murmured as a murderous
He
intent
landed
appeared
behind
in
the
her
girl
eyes.
and then swung the crutch towards the girl's head.
Run! Cyclops roared. The girl quivered. She did not even have the courage to turn
Chapter
around and look at
1981.
Qin Fei Yang.
The four of
She
them stood at
directly
the top of the
dived and
mountain
rushed
and
out.
concealed their aura.
She reacted in time
They looked at the
and
beast
narrowly
tied and
avoided
Mu
the attack
Tianyang
of the
in front
crutch.
of them with deep
Qin
shock on
Fei
their
Yang
faces.
raised his eyebrows
With his
and
own
looked at the
strength,
girl's back.
he could actually clash
shook
with
his
such a
head and
terrifying
said,
beast
"What
tied.
a pity."
Moreover,
The girl stabilized her
there were 4
body
monarch
and
god
turned
level
around to
beast
look at Qin
emperors.
Fei Yang.
This
There
person's
was
means
nothing
were
else in
also
her eyes.
terrifying. Only
First,
fear.
there was Zhang
Until now,
Haotian. She still did not
there was the
understand how
even more
Cripple died,
terrifying Mu
and his
Tianyang.
speed was even faster
Most
than them.
importantly,
They were
perfect
unknown
war
in the
god.
past. What kind of
Who
skill
exactly
was
were
this?
these 2 people?
Qin Fei Yang
Qin
glanced
Fei
at the
Yang
3 of them
smiled
and
and
said
said
telepathically,
Although
"Brother
it's a pity,
don't
it
say
doesn't
that I'm
matter
not
because you will
honest.
die sooner or
The
later.
opportunity is right
The
in
girl,
front of you.
Cyclops,
Quickly
and
make
Li
your
Gui
move."
could not help but turn
Me.
pale.
He was stunned.
Qin Fei Yang waved
He
the
shook
crutch
his
in his
head and
hand
smiled
as he
bitterly.
walked towards the girl
"Brother
step by
Zhang,
step.
Aren't you making things
Cyclops,
difficult
so you
for
are
me?
here. Still
It took me a
hiding.
long time to
Fire
find you."
Lotus and Qin
But
Rushuang
at this
raised
moment,
their eyebrows.
an angry shout
It seemed
was
that
heard.
this person did not
Qin
want
Fei
to show
Yang
his
was
true
taken
strength.
aback. That's not
He
right.
turned around and saw
The
a
4 girls
white-clothed
must
young
have a
man
lot
with
of
a
soul
murderous
stones.
aura breaking through the air.
But he's still holding
He was
back
holding
and
a
not
golden
making his
longbow
move.
in his hand.
Qin Dage,
His aura
Sister
was
Rushuang.
also that of a perfect
Don't you think
war
this
god.
is strange? Give me
It
your
feels
life.
like he doesn't care
The
about these
white-robed
soul
young
stones
man
at all.
roared.
He
Fire
grabbed the
Lotus
bow with
said
his left hand
telepathically
and pulled the bowstring with his
That's
right
right.
hand.
This
Divine
person
power
isn't
gushed
even
out
afraid
and
of the
formed a
black
golden
dragon.
arrow. Why would he
Whoosh.
be afraid
As
of
the
these
white-robed
people?
young
man loosened his
Qin
grip.
Rushuang
The
raised her
golden arrow
eyebrows.
shattered the void and flew
There's
towards
only
the girl
one
at a terrifying
explanation.
speed.
This person
Damn
doesn't
it.
lack soul
Seeing
stones.
this,
The girl's
perhaps his true
expression
identity
changed
is
drastically.
even more shocking than
She
Ye
quickly
Yun's.
dove down and flew towards
Qin Fei Yang
Cyclops and
said
Li
to
Gui.
himself,
Fire
"Then
Lotus
why
and
is
the
he
other 2
following
were
us like
also
this?"
surprised. Does he have the
She
same
ran away as
intentions
soon
as
as she
Nye
saw
Yun?
this person.
Fire Lotus
Where did
was
this person
suspicious.
come from?
Who knows?
However,
Qin Fei
the
Yang
feeling
frowned.
he gives me is the
Although
same
the
as
white-robed
before.
young man wanted to
There's
kill
a
the
hint
girl.
of familiarity
The arrow was
amidst
also
the
aimed at him because the
unfamiliarity.
white-robed young man
Qin
was
Fei
behind
Yang
him and the
said
girl was in front of him.
telepathically.
The arrow
Why don't we
arrived
just
in the
find
blink
a
of an
chance
eye.
to control him
It
and
was
read his
extremely
memories?
sharp. Qin Rushuang suggested. Qin
His
Fei Yang glanced
cultivation
at
is
the
higher
arrow
than
and took a
mine.
step forward.
I can't control
The arrow
him.
immediately
Besides,
passed through his
although
original
we all
position.
know that he's hiding
If he
his
did not
strength,
dodge,
we don't know
this
how
arrow
much he's
would have
hiding.
shattered his bones.
What if
At
he's
this
stronger than
moment,
us? The girl had
So
already
let's not
arrived
take
in
the
front
risk
of
and wait and
Cyclops and
see.
Li Gui.
Similarly,
She grabbed
if he
them
doesn't
with each
have
hand
any ill
and flew
intentions,
away. Then if
don't
we
run
expose
if you
him,
have the
it will
guts.
instead break
The
the current
white-robed
balance.
young man said angrily.
Perhaps when the time
Don't
comes,
be arrogant.
it will backfire.
We are not afraid of
Qin
you.
Fei Yang thought.
It's just that it's
All
not
right
time to
then.
fight with you
Hurry
yet.
up and get rid of
After
them.
the girl finished
Let's
speaking,
continue our
she
journey.
disappeared without looking
Qin
back.
Rushuang transmitted her voice.
They escaped
Qin
again.
Fei Yang nodded
The
and led
white-robed
the
young
3
man
to the foot of
stopped
the
in the
mountain.
void
and looked in the
He
direction
said in
where
a
the
low
3 of them
voice,
disappeared.
"Wait for me here."
His eyes were
With
filled
that,
with anger.
he flew towards
Seeing
the peak
that
of the
the 3 of
mountain
them were
alone.
about to die in your hands,
It's great to have a
this person
concealment
suddenly
technique.
appeared.
What
He
a
was endlessly
coincidence.
envious. Fire Lotus
Those who
and
don't
Xueqi
lack
flew
soul
to
stones
Qin
are
Fei
even
Yang
better.
side and looked at the
Fire
white-robed
Lotus
young man
said,
with a voice transmission.
"You don't lack
As
soul
for
stones?"
Qin Rushuang,
She
he
flew
was
towards
stunned.
Cripple's corpse.
He suspiciously looked at the
Yes.
Fire Lotus
What a
and asked,
coincidence.
"Who doesn't lack
Qin
soul
Fei
stones?"
Yang
muttered and looked at the
Who
white-robed
knows?
young man with flickering
Fire
eyes.
Lotus shrugged. Below, on the mountain
Qin
peak,
Rushuang searched Cripple's body for a while. Suddenly,
her
as
eyes
they
lit
watched
up
Mu
and she took out
Tianyang
an
battle the four
interspatial
beast
ring from
emperors,
Cripple's chest.
the four girls grew
There's an
increasingly shocked.
interspatial ring.
There was also
This
a strong
person
sense
must
of
have
a
a
lot
lot
of
in
soul
their
stones.
eyes.
The reason why
Qin
Mu
Rushuang
Tianyang
muttered
could
and
collide
dripped
with
blood
the
on
beast
it to
tide
claim
and fight the
ownership.
four beast emperors
She
was
then
entirely
checked the
because of that
contents of
bloody
the
blade.
interspatial ring.
They were also
In
people
the
who had
sky,
seen the world.
the white-robed young
Therefore,
man
they could
finally
judge that the
retracted
bloody
his
blade
gaze
was at
and
least
put
a
away the
divine
golden
weapon that
longbow.
surpassed the peak level.
He looked at Qin
Who
Fei
wouldn't be
Yang and the
tempted by
others.
such a
divine weapon.
Aren't you
Therefore,
Zhang Haotian? They all wanted to
at
snatch
this
it and
moment,
take it for themselves.
there was a hint of surprise
However,
in his eyes.
They didn't know that a
That's
crisis
me.
was approaching at
Qin
this
Fei
moment.
Yang
Smiled and
I
asked,
say, the four of
"May
you,
I know who
don't
you are?"
keep looking in
The
front.
white-robed young
Pay
man
attention
said,
to your back.
"I'm Ye Yun."
A laugh
Nye Yun
suddenly rang out.
Fire Lotus was stunned
Following
and sent a
that,
voice transmission.
one-eyed dragon and baleful ghost screamed as their heads exploded like watermelons. Why does he want to kill them?
Seeing this scene,
at the same
the girl
time,
and Zhang Yunfei's
below,
expressions
Qin
changed, and they
Rushuang also
immediately
looked at
turned
Nye
around to
Yun
look.
in surprise.
But in the void
Qin
in front of
Feiyong
them,
said to himself,
there wasn't even a
he has
shadow.
already revealed his
What's
identity.
going on?
You
The
still
two of them
don't
were
understand?
bewildered. I've
Fire
already
Lotus
said that
raised
you
her
must pay
eyebrows
attention
and
to
sent
your
her
voice
back.
transmission.
Why didn't
What
you
do you
listen?
mean?
Qin Feiyong said to
himself,
rang out again.
On the surface,
and it was
he
right
wants to
behind
kill
their
Cripple
ears.
and the others. The two of them
But in
felt
reality,
their hair stand on
he wants
end.
to save them.
They immediately realized
So you're
that
saying
it was
that
the
the arrow he
concealment
shot just
technique.
now was actually
Boom.
aimed at you?
The two of them
Fire
released
Lotus
their
sent a
divine
voice
power.
transmission.
But just as they released their divine power, they suddenly felt that something had poked the back of their
Chapter
heads.
1974.
Following that, two murderous auras
This
appeared.
person must have been hiding
next
and
moment,
watching from afar.
The two of them
Seeing
screamed
that
in
the cripple was
despair as
killed
their
and
heads
the sea of chi
exploded.
of one-eyed dragon
Flesh
and
and
baleful
blood
ghost were
splattered
destroyed.
everywhere.
When
He
the
pretended
corpses
to
of
be
the
their
two men
enemy.
fell to the ground,
So his appearance
Qin
was not a
Feiyong
coincidence
also
at
revealed
all.
himself. Qin Feiyong
He
snickered.
lowered his head and looked at the
He's
four
courting
corpses.
death.
His
A
expression
murderous
didn't
intent
change
flashed
at all.
in
Fire Lotus's
Then,
eyes.
he bent down
No
and
rush.
took the 4 Qian
After
Kuan
seeing
rings.
what I can do,
After binding
he
them with
probably
blood,
won't act rashly again.
he
He carefully examined
Let's
them.
wait and see what he's going to do
Huai,
next.
Fire
Qin
Lotus
Feiyong said
and
telepathically.
Qin Rushuang also flew up.
Okay.
Looking at the
Fire
headless
Lotus
corpses on the
responded
ground.
secretly.
Fire Lotus
But
and
Huai
Qin
did not know
Rushuang's
about
expressions
this.
didn't change at all.
Qin Rushuang also
But
took the
Huai's mouth
interspatial
twitched
ring
violently.
and flew to Qin
Four
Feiyong's
perfect
side.
realm war gods
She
were
looked at
killed
Qin
in seconds
Feiyong
just
with a
like
smile
that.
and said,
They died
"This
without
cripple has
any
a lot
value.
of soul stones." After a while, is that so?
Qin Feiyong withdrew his gaze and looked at Qin Rushuang and Huai
I took
with
a
a
rough
smile
look.
on his face. There should be at
How
least
is it?
50,000.
Qin Rushuang smiled.
A total of 200,000 soul stones. Qin Feiyong and Fire Lotus looked at each other and were overjoyed.
At least
What a
300
great
million in
harvest.
total.
While
Not
talking,
including the
they were
herbs and
also paying
elixirs.
attention to Nye Yun's
Qin
expression.
Feiyong smiled.
In fact, these words were deliberately
200,000.
said for Nye
Qin
Yun to
Rushuang
hear.
and Fire
They
Lotus
wanted to
looked
see
at
how
each
Nye
other.
Yun would react after hearing these
soul
words.
stones.
But in the
Including
end,
Nye Yun and
they were
Cripple,
disappointed.
They had obtained a total
From beginning
of
to
300,000
all
soul
Nye Yun
stones.
showed was surprise
This
at these soul
unexpected
stones.
wealth was really exciting.
There was nothing else.
Qin Rushuang came back to her senses
telepathically.
Let's
It
go,
seems that
let's
this
go.
person is very shrewd.
There are still
100,000 soul
Definitely.
stones waiting for us.
Otherwise,
He wouldn't have hidden in the dark and let the cripple and the other 3 come out to kill us.
Qin Feiyong
Fire Lotus
snickered.
covered her mouth and laughed.
Then these soul stones.
Sister Rushuang,
Qin
it's not
Rushuang
just
looked at Qin
100,000
Feiyong,
soul stones.
clutching the
There
interspatial
are
ring
also
tightly
peak
in her
divine
hand.
skills and
She
divine
looked
weapons.
quite nervous.
Yes,
Qin Feiyong
thought and said telepathically.
This assessment was
Give
really
them to
worth
great-grandmother and the
Qin
white-eyed wolf
Rushuang
first.
was so happy that she
I-
forgot about
Qin
home.
Rushuang
Qin
frowned.
Feiyong shook his
I
head
know
and
what you're
smiled.
thinking. He secretly
However,
sent the Qian
even if
Kuan
I give
rings
you
to
all
the
these soul
ancient
stones
castle.
now, then
Do you have the
he
time
went
to
around the
refine them?
beast tide and headed
So it's
straight
better
for the
to give it to
hinterland.
great-grandmother
As for
and the
Mu
others.
Tianyang,
Even
he
though
was
the
not in the mood
examination
to
only
care.
lasts for 2
It
days.
would be best if he
2
died
days
under the
outside
beast
is equivalent
tide.
to 2 years in
Ninth
the
Heaven
ancient
Palace.
castle.
Inside
They
the
might have
palace,
already made a breakthrough
these
before
two
the
young
end of the
people are really
assessment.
terrifying.
What's more,
Especially
there's still
this
Nye
Zhang
Yun and One-Eyed
Haotian.
Dragon.
Not only did he
I think
easily
they must
change
have
the
a
target
soul
of the beast
stones
tied
on
to
them.
Mu Tianyang,
Qin Feiyong
but he
said
also
with a
saw through
smile.
Nye Yun's
All right.
disguise and obtained
Qin
so many
Rushuang
soul
responded
stones.
and handed the
biggest winner
interspatial
of this
ring to Qin
assessment is
Feiyong.
undoubtedly him.
Huai hurriedly
It's a
said,
pity.
Brother Zhang,
Yes.
is there no share for
What
me?
a pity. You're
If he
really
didn't slander
thick-skinned.
Ninth Heaven Palace,
You want soul
he would be a
stones
talent
without
worth
doing
nurturing.
anything? Scram as
The
far
group
as you
was
can.
filled with regret.
Qin Rushuang
Mu
laughed
Tianyang
angrily.
is not bad
Hearing
either.
this,
That
Huai's
blood
expression
blade,
was
according to
rather
my
awkward.
judgment, should
Qin
be a
Feiyong
legendary
smiled.
divine weapon. He raised his
And
head
his
to look
brain
at
is
Nye
not
Yun
much
and
worse
asked,
than Zhang
You said
Haotian's.
earlier that your name
We
is
could
Nye
nurture
Yun?
him with all our
Yes.
might.
Nye Yun
Someone
nodded.
else said.
I seem
However,
to have heard that the
they
city
did not
lord
know
of
that
Star
the
River
Blood
City
Blade
had
also
not fully
has a son
recovered
called
yet.
Nye Yun.
The black-haired
You're
old
not
man
him, are
scanned the
you?
crowd and suddenly said, You all only paid attention to
Feiyong
Zhang
said in
Haotian and Mu
surprise.
Tianyang.
Yes.
Did you not notice
Nye
that
Yun
young
nodded.
man called Mu Qing?
Fire
Lotus said disdainfully.
Qing? He's a
The
standard
group raised their
playboy.
heads and looked
Brother,
at Mu Qing,
we'd better
who was
keep our
standing
distance
beside
from him.
Xueqi, with puzzlement
Playboy.
in their eyes.
Nye Yun was stunned.
When Zhang Haotian was in
Feiyong
stealth
scolded.
mode, Fire
Even
Lotus
we didn't know
don't
where he
be rude.
was.
However, this
Fire
Mu
Lotus
Qing was
nodded,
able to discover his
feeling
location
wronged.
at the first
Qin
moment.
Feiyong looked
And
at
I
Nye Yun
also
and
found
said
a problem.
apologetically,
From the
Brother
start of the
Nya,
assessment
My
until
little
now.
sister has been a little
Zhang
naughty since she
Haotian's
was young.
whereabouts seem to be
Please
under the
forgive
control
her.
of this Mu Qing.
Brother Zhang, isn't
You're
this
too
strange?
serious. The black-haired old man
it's not
said.
your sister's
It
fault.
seems to be the
Because
case.
people like me
How
can't
did he
get
do
rid
it?
of the reputation
Everyone
of being a
started
playboy.
discussing.
Nie Yun said
This Mu
helplessly.
Qing, although
You
his
can't
strength
say
and methods
that.
are not as good as
Some
Mu
rich people
Qianyang's,
can still do
according
it.
to this old man's
For
observation,
example, Brother Nie.
Zhang Haotian
Qin
seems to be
Feiyang
afraid of this
smiled.
person. The
Me.
black-haired old
Nie
man
Yun
said
was stunned and
thoughtfully.
asked suspiciously,
Everyone looked at Mu
"What do you
Qing
mean?"
again, and the
If
expression
Brother
in their
Nie
eyes
is really
changed.
a playboy,
the
Then I
black-haired
don't
old
think
man
you'll participate
said.
in the
In
9
addition,
Heavens Palaces
this old
test.
man has a question
And
in his
now,
heart.
in front of small characters like us,
You
won't be
everyone
so
was
humble.
suspicious. This
Qin
old man
Fei
has a
Yang
feeling
said.
that whether it is
Nie
Nie
Yun
Yun's
was
group
lost
of
in
6
thought
or
for
the
a while and
beast-tide,
suddenly laughed.
they are all targeting
Since I
Zhang
was
Haoyan.
born,
This is the
and this
first
old
time
man
I've heard
has a
someone
feeling
praise
that
me
someone
like
is
this.
manipulating
But
all
Brother
of this behind
Zhang's
the
last
scenes.
sentence. This
The
Nye doesn't dare
black-haired
to
old man
agree.
said.
Hearing
Last
this,
sentence,
the others were
Qin
puzzled.
Fei Yang was
But
stunned.
Feng Yuan's
Nie
eyes
Yun
trembled
smiled.
slightly. Brother
The
Zhang just
black-haired
said
old
that
man
you're all
said
small
again.
characters.
And why do Nie
But
Yun's
do
group
small
of 6 have
characters
so many
dare to
offend
offend
Feng Zijuan?
Qin Fei Yang shook his head with a bitter smile and
First
sighed.
elder,
As
we're
the
like
son of the
newborn
city lord of
calves who aren't
Starcy
afraid of
City,
tigers.
it is not strange
Now
that
we're
Nie Yun has
regretting
tens
it.
of thousands of soul stones
This one
on
doesn't
him,
see
right?
any trace of
Feng
regret
Yuan
on
could
your
not
faces.
sit still and looked at the
Moreover,
black-haired old man.
this one has seen Brother
Nie
Zhang's
Yun is
courage
not
with my own
strange.
eyes. But what about the other
Nie
5?
Yun said. More importantly,
You've seen it with
the
your
number
own
of soul
eyes?
stones on them
Qin
is so
Fei Yang
similar.
and
the other 3 looked at each
This
other
gives
and
this
looked
old
at
man
Nie
the
Yun
feeling that someone
suspiciously.
gave them the
A
same
few
number
days
of
ago,
soul stones
when
before
Brother
the
Zhang
assessment.
bid for the 9th grade
The
elixir
black-haired
fire
old
at the
man
Treasure
said.
Pavilion's auction
Feng
house.
Yuan could not
This
help
one was
but
also
panic.
there. The
When
black-haired
Brother
old
Zhang
man
bid,
pondered for a
the
while
whole
and
place
said,
was dead
"The
silent.
more this old man
In
thinks
the
about
end,
it, the
Brother
more
Zhang
strange
got
it
the
is."
elixir fire at
After
a
the
super low
assessment
price
is
of
over,
1,500,000.
not only do we have to
investigate Mu
This
Tianyang's
kind of
identity,
thing is unheard of
but
before.
also the cause of the
Nie
beast
Yun
tide.
smiled.
Speaking
It's
of
just
this,
pure luck. The black-haired
Qin
old
Fei
man
Yang
looked at a
shook his head,
purple-clothed woman below
blushing
and
with
said,
shame.
"Shangguan
Nie Yun
Fenglan,
shook his
this
head
matter will be handed
non-committally.
over to the law
Then
enforcement
he
hall."
looked around and sighed.
Yes. The
Brother
purple-clothed
Zhang,
woman
you
stood
see,
up and
the
responded
Heavenly Dragon
respectfully.
Mountain range is
Feng
full of
Yuan
danger.
glanced at the purple-clothed
Why don't
woman
we travel
and then at the
together so
black-haired
that we
old
can
man.
look after each
A
other?
cold light flashed in the
Travel
depths of his
together.
old eyes.
Fire Lotus
Back to
and
Qin
Qin
Fei
Rushuang
Yang
could
and the
not help
others.
but frown.
Avoiding one
Sure.
monarch god-level
Qin
beast
Fei
after
Yang, on the
another,
other hand,
they finally
only
arrived
pondered
at the
for a moment
hinterland
and
and
nodded
evening.
happily.
Along the way,
Fire Lotus said
they could be
unhappily,
said to be treading on
"Brother,
thin ice
how
and
can
did
you
not
agree
dare
to a
be
stranger's
careless for a
request so
moment.
casually?"
Because there were too many
Nie Yun
monarch
was also
god-level
a little
beasts.
surprised.
The 4 of
He
them
had thought
stopped
that
at
this
the top
person
and
would
refuse,
refuse,
and scanned the
but
front.
he did not expect him
Qin
to
Fei
agree
Yang
so
secretly
easily.
said,
There
Qin
is
Fei
still a
Yang
distance
smiled
to
and
look
looked
at
at
Heaven
Fire
Palace,
Lotus.
saying,
"We must be especially
"Girl,
careful.
you've seen how dangerous
This
this Sky
hinterland was
Dragon
even
Mountain
more
range is now.
terrifying. Monarch god-level beasts were everywhere.
To be honest,
if
I
they
really
were not
don't have the
careful,
strength to
their
protect you
lives
all
would be in
alone."
danger. Fire
Fire
Lotus said
Lotus and
unhappily,
Qin
"But
Rushuang
you
nodded.
can't just drag a random
Huai
person
chuckled
along."
and said,
"Let me
"How
lead
can
the
this
way.
be called casual?
I promise to bring you
Look
to
at
Ninth
Brother
Heaven
Nye.
Palace safely."
Does he look like a sinister
villain? The 3
No.
of them looked at
On the
Xueqi
contrary,
in surprise.
Brother Nye is
Yes.
friendly and
Along the
powerful.
way,
I
it's our
haven't
honor
done
that he
anything.
took the initiative
I
to
have to
travel
show
with
some
us.
value. Otherwise,
Of course, this is
how
also
shameful
fate.
would it be?
Brother Nye,
Huai
don't you
said.
think so?
Qin
Fei
Qin
Yang
Fei
shook his
Yang
head
chuckled,
and laughed, saying,
"Yes, yes,
"All right,
yes.
next."
Nie
Nie
Yun
nodded
you.
repeatedly.
Let's go."
Feeling a little embarrassed
Follow
by
me.
Qin Fei Yang's
Huai
praise,
called out and
Qin Fei
plunged
Yang
into the
smiled
forest
and
below.
said, "Since we're
Qin
traveling
Fei Yang
together,
and the other
I
2
hope
looked
Brother
at each
Nye
other
will take
and
care of
followed
us in the next
closely
2
behind
days."
Huai.
Nie
Nie
Yun
Sky Dragon
hurriedly
Mountain
waved his
range.
hand and said,
They definitely could
"You
not
can't
fly
say
or
that.
teleport.
We're taking care of each
Because
other."
this was equivalent to a
Yes,
ready-made
yes.
target.
Taking
Therefore,
care of each other.
they had to use the
Qin
surrounding
Fei Yang
environment
laughed
as
and
a
said,
cover to avoid
"Then
being
let's
discovered
continue
by the
on our
beasts.
way."
While traveling, not only do we have to pay attention to our surroundings, but we also have to be careful of the underground. Because there are terrifying beasts lurking everywhere in the underground of the Sky
Chapter
Dragon Mountain
1982.
range. Don't
Nie
talk
Yun
about
reminded.
it. Under
Qin
Huai's
Fei Yang
lead,
nodded.
they were
turned
able
his head
to
and
accurately
glanced at
avoid
Fire
the
Lotus
monarch god
and
level
said,
beasts every
"Girl,
time.
did you see
This
that?"
made Qin
Brother
Fei
Nye
Yang even
reminded
more
us the
curious
moment
about
he came.
Huai's
"And
identity.
you still doubt his
To know
character?"
so much about the Sky
Fire
Dragon
Lotus
Mountain
pursed
range.
her lips.
This was not
And
something
after
an
being
ordinary person
repeatedly
could
flattered
do.
by Qin Fei Yang,
Midnight. Dawn.
Nie Yun couldn't help
Qin
blushing.
Fei Yang and the other
But in
3
his
stopped
heart,
and looked
he
up
was
at the
laughing.
giant peak in front
To
of them.
gain trust so
The
quickly,
giant peak
it
towered
seemed
like
that
a
this
sharp
person
sword.
wasn't much. On the peak
Just
of the
that
mountain,
his methods were a little
clouds
tyrannical.
lingered and a stairway to heaven could be vaguely
What are you
seen.
doing? That's
Keeping
right.
him by your side
That
is
was the
simply a
9th
ticking
Heaven
time
Palace.
bomb. In
Fire
other words,
Lotus
after a
transmitted her
long
voice.
journey, they had
Is there no
finally
danger
completed
if
the
we chase him away? Swoosh.
I'm afraid the
Suddenly,
danger is greater.
Qin Rushuang
After
took the
all,
lead and
it's
rushed
easy
to the
to
peak
dodge
of the
an open
mountain.
spear,
Brother
but
Jiang,
difficult to guard
shouldn't
against
we
a
trust
hidden
each other
arrow.
more?
Besides,
Look at her
right now,
she's
we
afraid
really
that I'll
need a
beat her
helper.
to it.
Yu
You and
Yi's
Qin
face
Rushuang
darkened as
are
he looked
basically
at Qin
idlers in
Feiyong
this
angrily.
assessment.
Because
Don't
your cultivation
worry,
is too
you'll
weak,
get your share.
even if you expose
Qin
your
Feiyong
undead
smiled
energy,
and also
it won't
rose
have
into
any
the sky.
fundamental effect. If not for Hua Yi
And
leading
Hua
the
Yi
way,
clearly
they
doesn't
would
want
not
to
have been
take
able
action.
to pass through the hinterland
As for
and
me,
reach the
I
ninth
don't
heaven
want to
palace so
expose
easily.
too much of my strength. Hua Yi caught up and laughed.
Therefore,
How
Nie
much are
Yang's
you going to
arrival
give
is
me?
actually a good thing
This?
for us.
Qin
After
Feiyong
all,
was stunned
he
and
has the
pointed at
cultivation
Qin
of a
Rushuang in
perfect
front
war
of him.
god. As long as
It
he doesn't
depends on
encounter
her.
monarch-level beasts,
Then I
he
won't
can deal
count
with
on
them
it.
all by himself.
Hua Yi pursed his
Qin
lips.
Feiyong secretly
Qin Feiyong
said,
could not help
Fire
but laugh.
Lotus suddenly said,
Swoosh.
So you want
The
to
four
beat
of
him
them
at his
landed
own
on
game.
the
Peak of the mountain one
That's
after
right.
another. This
Qin
person is
Rushuang
following
was
us
naturally
because he
the
wants to
first.
plot against us
Looking at the
behind our
stairway in
backs.
front of them, Then why
them
don't we
were
take
filled with
advantage of this
emotions.
and make him our helper?
At this moment,
Qin
other
Feiyong
than the
secretly
white-haired old
laughed.
man guarding the
Even
stairway,
so, I
there were
still
only
think
the
it's
4 of them at the
inappropriate.
peak of the mountain.
After all,
Obviously,
his strength is
they
too
were the
strong.
first group to arrive
You
here.
and that mysterious Hua
As for the
Yi don't need
white-haired
to worry
old man,
about it. But
he
Sister
sat
Rushwang and
cross-legged
I,
beside the
if he
stairway
suddenly
as usual,
attacks us,
and did not
we
seem
won't
to
be
notice
able to
the
defend
arrival of Qin
ourselves.
Feiyong and the other 3.
Peak divine skill, peak divine weapon, 100,000 soul stones. Just thinking about it makes me excited. Fire Lotus giggled. Don't be so happy. After all, you can't cultivate even if I give you the soul stones. For you, the death fruit and the ghost wood are the most important. Qin Feiyong snickered. Fire Lotus scoffed. Can't I be happy for you guys?
Haha. Qin Feiyong secretly laughed and turned to look at the white-haired old man.
Hua Yi whispered.
This old man's strength is terrifying.
Yes.
Qin Feiyong nodded and transmitted his voice. How much do you know about the 9 Heavens Palace?
I don't know.
Hua Yi shook his head.
Bullshit. Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes at him.
Since he knew the Heavenly Dragon Mountain range like the back of his hand, how could he not know about the 9 Heavens Palace?
I'm telling the truth. Hua Yi looked at Qin Feiyong helplessly. Then he looked at Qin Rushwang and smiled. Miss, it's still early. Why don't we discuss how to distribute the rewards? Qin Rushwang glanced at Hua Yi and frowned. This has nothing to do with you, right?
How is it not related?
If I didn't lead the way, would you have come here so easily? Although I didn't contribute much along the way, I still deserve a share. Hua Yi was unhappy.
Qin Rushwang rolled her eyes and said, Fine, I'll give you 10,000 soul stones.
10,000?
That's too little.
Hua Yi chuckled. Big brother Hua Yi, that's quite a lot.
Although you led the way into the hinterland, my brother's contribution is the greatest.
Fire Lotus said. That's right.
If it wasn't for my little brother, you would have died a long time ago. There's something you don't know yet.
Nie Yun's group and the Beast Horde were all ordered by Feng Yuan. Qin Rushwang transmitted her voice. What?
Hua Yi raised his eyebrows and turned to Qin Feiyong.
It's true.
Qin Feiyong nodded. That damn old bastard. Hua Yi cursed and transmitted his voice. Why didn't you tell me earlier?
Would telling you work? Can you resolve the Beast Horde? Fire Lotus asked. No.
Hua Yi shook his head.
That's not right. Feng Yuan is determined to get rid of us in this assessment. However, it would appear that my brother is superior. He was able to easily resolve these dangers.
Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyong with admiration and chuckled.
He's really good.
Hua Yi gave Qin Feiyong a thumbs up and frowned. But that Mu Tianyong, who is he?
Why is he so powerful? I don't know him.
Qin Feiyong shook his head.
Come on.
If you don't know him, why would you go and scheme against him? Hua Yi rolled his eyes and chuckled. But this time, I really have to thank him.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to get rid of those Beast Horde.
Qin Feiyong smiled and looked at Fire Lotus and Qin Rushwang, saying, You must be tired after rushing all the way here.
Take a good rest. The two nodded and sat down cross-legged. They took out a divine crystal and began to absorb the energy in it to recuperate.
Qin Feiyong glanced at Hua Yi and said, Brother Hua, let's talk.
Talk about what?
Hua Yi looked at him suspiciously.
Who are you?
Why do you want to get close to me?
Of course, to show my sincerity, I will tell you my identity.
Qin Feiyong transmitted his voice.
I'm just an ordinary person. As for getting close to you, didn't I tell you earlier? I want you to help me pass the assessment. Hua Yi said.
Brother Hua, that's boring. You know so much about the Sky Dragon Mountain range and you still need my help.
Qin Feiyong frowned. Hua Yi said helplessly, I'm telling the truth. Why don't you believe me?
Fine. Pretend I didn't ask. But I sincerely hope that you don't have any ulterior motives.
If you do come at me, don't hurt Fire Lotus and the others. Otherwise, I won't let you go.
Qin Feiyong transmitted his voice.
Why is your heart so heavy?
Hua Yi was speechless.
There's nothing I can do about it.
The world is so cruel. In order to survive, I have to be careful.
Qin Feiyong said.
Xueqi shook his head and laughed and said, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you."
"That's for the best." Qin Feiyong also smiled. At the same time, 9 Heavens Palace. In a certain palace, a middle-aged man sat by the tea table, quietly sipping tea. This person was Feng Wanhai. Bang! Suddenly, the door was kicked open. A red-haired old man walked in angrily. It was Feng Yuan.
Feng Wanhai was startled, put down his teacup, and asked suspiciously, "Father, why are you back?"
"Jiang Haotian and the others have already passed the assessment. Is there a need to continue watching?" Feng Yuan said gloomily, and sat down opposite Feng Wanhai.
Looking at the tea set on the table, his face was as gloomy as water.
"Bastard!" Suddenly, he shouted angrily and sent the tea table flying.
Feng Wanhai jumped in fright and hurriedly asked, "Did our plan to frame Jiang Haotian fail?"
"The plan to frame him was very successful," Feng Yuan said. "Then why are you doing this?" Feng Wanhai was puzzled.
Feng Yuan said in a deep voice, "Although we succeeded in framing Jiang Haotian, it also aroused the suspicion of the Great Elder."
"What?
Why would he suspect us?"
Feng Wanhai's face changed. "No.
He hasn't suspected us yet. However, he is already suspecting that there is someone behind Nie Yun's group and the Beast Tide. And he also ordered Shangguan Fenglan to investigate this matter."
Feng Yuan said.
"Shangguan Fenglan?" Feng Wanhai raised his eyebrows. Feng Yuan said, "This matter can't be underestimated. Go to Sky Dragon Mountain Range immediately and kill all the beasts and people who know about it."
"Kill them?"
"But now, the assessment isn't over yet,"
Feng Wanhai said.
"Don't worry, everyone has already dispersed. The Great Elder also didn't pay attention to the situation in Sky Dragon Mountain Range.
But just in case, you'd better disguise yourself," Feng Yuan said.
"Okay. I'll go right away." Feng Wanhai nodded, got up and left in a hurry.
"Trash, all of you are trash."
The anger in Feng Yuan's heart was really difficult to calm down. In order to bribe Nie Yun and the others, he spent a lot of soul stones, but what did he get in the end?
He got nothing. He still had to do it himself. It was simply a waste of soul stones.
The most infuriating thing was that these soul stones all fell into Jiang Haotian's hands in the end.
Wasn't this too convenient for him? P.S. Today, 2 chapters.
You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.